Hello, everyone. My name is Trevor Grasse, and welcome to the Secret Underworld of Giza, Part 4. This is the fourth part in a series, but don't worry if you have not seen Part 1 through 3 yet, you can watch them afterwards and still have a comprehension of what's going on in this film. Um, Basically, I promised that I would try to get out as soon as possible after the Khafre Project's March 15th press conference an analysis of the discoveries they presented there. And I said I wanted to have William Brown and Richard Gabriel come and talk about all of the information we already had about the plateau beforehand and how it corresponds to their new discoveries. And we're going to do that. But basically, the plan is flipped back and forth so many times. It's 2 months ago, the press conference happened at this point. And I need to get this information out now, basically. There were all different episodes I could have put as part 4 of this. There's so much more information still to get to. But the highest priority at this moment is to keep up with the current events because so much has happened since we released part 3, as everyone knows, I believe. We knew this was coming. The Khafre Project, Filippo Biondi, Armando May, and Corrado Malanga, these three men have, also known as the Khafre Project, have released unbelievable discoveries from underneath the Giza Plateau, and the entire world is in an uproar over it, and basically no one has any clue what the actual science is behind this. You have people challenging it who don't have any clue what's actually going on. You have people supporting it. You have people on the fence. And you have so much disinformation and misinformation and irrelevant information going around. So I need to get this information out right now. And I'm going to deviate from the formula of this series a little bit. I'm not going to be able to add in music to this, or I'm not going to make it fancy. There's just so much information that needs to be dropped out right now that I'm going to plow through it all in this episode just by myself. And then soon I will bring back William and Richard after I've presented a lot of this base information, and we will incorporate all the information that they have gathered over the last 20 years that corresponds to all of the discoveries that have come out now. So yeah, William, Richard, and I have been working together for several years. They've been working together even longer than that on the plateau, but all of us have been investigating this mystery of what is beneath the Giza Plateau for at least like 20 years. All of us, we've been obsessed with it, and we have been on the ground at Giza. We have been going underground at Giza and filming and photographing, documenting, ground penetrating radar scanning all of these things. We have a wealth of evidence of what is underneath the Giza Plateau, far beyond what anyone else is bringing forward in terms of on the ground, actual hard evidence of these structures. So you can look back to parts 1 through 3 to cover some of that if you haven't seen them yet. I'm going to show a couple things that relate to the earlier episodes, but you don't need to know all of that before watching this. So basically, I'm going to run through all of this myself, and we will get them back on to go over it together soon enough. But pretty much, I'm one of the only people who can really give this information at this time, so I'm going to do it. I'm very close to the source of this story. I've been working on this a long time. I've been studying it a long time. I've been in direct communication with the Khafre Project for over half a year at this point, since last October at least. So 5 months before this conference even happened, I had made contact with them, but I'd been following them since 2022. Um, there's so much information to get to, so I'm just going to try and really cruise through it and say it all as concisely as possible. Um, I'm not going to spend too much time worrying about the critics and naysayers and haters out there because there's too many of them to address. And quite frankly, I mean, 95% of what these people are bringing to say this can't be real or can't be possible, it's completely irrelevant. Most of the critiques that are coming from, there are different tiers of some people are just being a little skeptical, but you have these people all the way to the one end of the spectrum just saying, oh, these guys are frauds. It's totally fake. This could never happen. And those people have no clue what they're talking about. And I can prove that tonight. So what I'm pulling together here is the ultimate compendium of resources for you to do your own research with This is for the real truth seekers. This is for the people who really want to know what's actually going on. I have pulled together everything you need to look these things up yourself. If it's stuff I can't describe, if it's over my head, I'll send you to the right people who can. So this is meant to be the one-stop shop. If you really want to know what's going on with these recent pyramid scans, this is the film. Okay, the bibliography in the description is going to give you every link you need to follow up on these things, and I'm going to direct you towards everyone and everything that is worth your time on this, because boy, is there a lot that is not worth your time. So we're going to differentiate between some fact and fiction on this topic today, and I hope all of you who truly have the attention span and the dedication and the earnest will to find the truth of this matter. I hope you'll really enjoy this because I've really pulled together a lot of the most important aspects of this. We are going to get into the technology itself. We're going to get into any critique that comes anywhere close to being a technical challenge to the technology. And then I'm going to show you some things that have already been shown by the Khafre Project that nobody is talking about that are world-changing details in themselves. We're going to see some things that no one has caught on to yet. I've got some of these slides from their original conference where I've translated the text to English. A lot of stuff that you have not seen yet, and even if you have seen it, you might not have known what you were looking at. So get ready and please make yourself comfortable. Get a snack because this is going to take as long as it takes. This isn't for the TikTok people. This isn't for the short attention spans. If you care about this subject and you actually want to know what's going on, you should love this because I'm not going to tell you what to think. I'm not going to ask you to believe me. I'm just going to give you everything you need to actually make an informed decision. That's how I like to work. And I frankly don't care what other people are going to say about this because most everyone out there talking about it is honestly clueless. I mean, I'm not saying that to be mean. I'm not saying it to be accusatory. Um, it's a simple fact that this is a question for synthetic aperture radar Doppler tomography experts and no one else. That's the fact of the matter. Okay, so that's the truth. Even if people are supporting it or against it, it doesn't matter. Basically, no one out there actually understands the technology. So we will explain the technology itself, and then we will explain so much more about what no one has seen yet. So without further ado, there's a lot to get to. Let's just get into these slides. So I'm going to go back to 2022, which is when Corrado Malanga and Filippo Biondi released their paper about the Great Pyramid. And we're going to get into this a little bit, but this is an overview shot of all of these orange chambers you see are new structures that they detected inside the Great Pyramid using this very same technology they're using today on the Middle Pyramid. All the green structures are the ones that we already knew about before. So here's another view of the internal structures of the Great Pyramid. They ended up showing us 20 different structures in total, all of these passageways, these huge ramps coming down both sides, all of these interesting chambers in the front, this tunnel coming across, many different structures, and of course this giant green rectangular chamber just above the Grand Gallery. This is the entrance and the Grand Gallery coming up underneath it here. So that was all released in their paper called Synthetic Aperture Radar Doppler Tomography Reveals Details of Undiscovered High-Resolution Internal Structure of the Great Pyramid of Giza. So first of all, everyone asking for a peer-reviewed study of this technology, this is it. You have to go back to 2022. And Filippo mentioned to me, why does he have to show a peer-reviewed study again when he already introduced the technology in 2022? Which is a great question because in this article, you can see so much of the science, the math, the everything they're doing to innovate what's called synthetic aperture radar. And people already have a huge, huge issue distinguishing from all these different types of what's called remote sensing technology. Remote sensing just means a non-invasive way to look under the ground and actually create structural models of voids that are down there. So there's many different ways to do that. You got GPR, which is just on the ground. You're moving a device over the ground and using electromagnetic waves to basically bounce down there. There's seismic scans that use sound waves bouncing off various levels of the subsurface strata. You've got conductivity tests, you got thermal imaging, you have muon scanning. All of these are different techniques, and we'll get into a little bit of each to distinguish it. But basically, synthetic aperture radar is a satellite-based technology, and it requires no on-site access whatsoever. So we'll talk about it more as we go along, but basically, this article, this scientific paper they put out in 2022 was their first release to the world explaining how this technology works, to some extent at least, because it is still a patent that is pending. It's Filippo Biondi's own method that has never been fully revealed to the world. But as we'll show, that's not necessarily any reason to disbelieve it or even be critical of it, because without showing the full method, you can still show that it works. And that's what we're seeing. We're literally seeing the scans, and people are still out there saying it can't happen or it's impossible, even though we're looking at it. So that's what we're going to get into. Synthetic aperture radar is a type of technology that has been used for a long time in different fields, not archaeology, but different fields using to scan the ground. And it does not penetrate very deep below the surface, which is, as far as any of these critiques coming from the critics, it's basically the only actual argument that comes anywhere close to a real challenge to the discoveries, but it doesn't really, because the innovation that Biondi has brought forward on it has actually allowed for using surface readings only to actually determine how seismic waves are coming up from below. So really, the radar is not penetrating into the ground more than a few centimeters or a meter or so at most. But what they read from the surface level is indicating how seismic waves are coming up and terminating at the surface. And you can see how they move around other structures underground. So this paper actually describes Filippo's software, which is the filter method of how to process these signals in a way to pull out some very subtle information from that data, which can actually give an indication of what's deep below ground, even though the radar is not penetrating below the surface very far. That's the basic concept of what, the people who have come closest to actually at least looking up what synthetic aperture radar is, um, which is it's similar to normal radar. The synthetic aperture is actually just the idea that it's basically creating a much larger satellite dish in order to get a much higher resolution by not creating a giant satellite dish in space, but actually moving a small one across and getting information from multiple points as it moves. So those who came closest to understanding SAR, would say, oh, well, this is impossible because SAR can't penetrate more than a few centimeters. Well, it's not. It doesn't have to. They're using that top level of information to process what's coming up from below. Because all these seismic micro movements, these tiny vibrations, if you negate all the other information and noise and all of that and can filter it out with the software that Filippo brilliantly invented, then you can actually detect these subtle micro movements from within the Earth. And that's the basics of why nobody has come any closer than that to actually understanding what Filippo's technology actually is. I don't understand all this math right here. I'm not an SAR expert. I can admit that. But I do listen to the people who do understand it. And so I have a basic idea of how it's working, but I can't tell you what all of these words mean. But those who claim to be experts should be able to understand every word in this paper. And there are, for the layman, plenty of illustrations that actually exemplify how the models were built from the scans. You can see the colorations that end up leading to determinations of what the actual voids look like. The vibrations move through empty space differently than they move through solid space. So you can tell the relative densities of the materials you're looking at. And if you do multiple of these different scans and different tomographic lines, then yes, you can build three-dimensional structures essentially and get a good idea of, how to build a 3D model of the voids within, whether they're caves or chambers or tunnels or tombs. However, when you start seeing things that are straight lines and right angle corners, these are interpreted as man-made structures, of course, because nature doesn't make cubes and perfect circles and these things that indicate, when you're looking inside the Great Pyramid, obviously it's man-made because it's inside it. But when you get underground, you have to use that type of indication if you're trying to understand that there's man-made structures versus natural ones. The only way to really tell is when you see these 90-degree angles and straight walls and things like that. So I'll just quickly scan through this and so you can see there's so much information in this article and no one is even going back to this. And very few who do recognize this article from 2022, which has not gotten nearly as much attention as it deserves, will understand that, their level of precision here, you could see how they're marking out very accurately the shape and size of all of these structures. And so, that's the first place to begin if you're really trying to get into the science of it. Read their 2022 paper and you can see more about that in some of my other videos. But coming from the secret underworld of Giza Part 3, this is what Bill Brown actually discovered, along with several others he was working with, but I think Bill has done more work than anyone to actually get this discovery brought to the public. And this is the Great Pyramid with their scan overlaid on it. And what we found was that there's a tunnel coming from the Great Pyramid all the way over to a temple complex in the east. This is the village of Nazlet El Saman right here, and this is where Bill and I have been working a lot, as well as Richard. And this is what's called the Khufu Causeway, or the Great Pyramid Causeway, which goes all the way east from the Great Pyramid up into the village, into what's called the Khufu Valley Temple, which Mark Lehner and Dr. Hawass have long been saying exists right here, which used to be along the waterfront of the Nile. But we have discovered, based on the eyewitness account of someone who was actually digging in his own basement before all these houses got demolished, this whole area that you can see is cleared. That was all part of the village until 2021. So only very recently, all of these homes were demolished. But we knew someone who was living right here beforehand, and he actually did excavations illegally in his own basement and discovered this entire temple complex, which you see over here. All of this is detailed in Secret Underworld of Giza Part 3. So for more information on that or the validation of it, just go see that resource. But this temple right here is one of the things we're really focusing on and actually trying to get a permit to excavate. And we are much closer than anyone could imagine because anyone following this story at all knows that, a work permit at Giza is the holy grail of Egypt. It's extremely difficult to get. Basically, no one but Zahi Hawass or Mark Lehner are allowed to work anywhere close to the Giza Plateau whatsoever. So it's incredibly difficult to get a work permit, but we have been working out every single factor. We've tried several times before. We know everything not to do, and this time we even have some financial backing, which has just been talked about in the past, but we didn't really have anyone ready to show the money, which is what we need in order to get the permit application accepted. So this is a major part of the story that you have to understand when it comes to how I ended up meeting the Khafre Project and getting involved with them. I made a shorter film about this too, if you want to see just the animation of this temple complex, and shows it stage by stage building all these chambers that we have eyewitness accounts describing. And so there's also this inverted pyramid structure in this temple, which is very, very interesting too. But off the side of it comes this extremely long corridor that is lined on both sides with these chambers, most of which are still sealed according to our sources. So this could be anything really. It's sort of like the Osiris shaft for the Khufu Causeway. The Osiris shaft is on the Khafre Causeway, about halfway along it, and it also has three different levels going down. But we'll see today that there's actually more than that, which we already knew. But this is a similar structure, kind of with these different levels coming down. And we know that it has this tunnel running straight over underneath the Great Pyramid. This tunnel was discovered in 1982. Dr. Hawass knew about that. A lot of the people in the ministry knew about that a long time ago, and they've never told the world. So this is part of it. This is another view from above. And you can see right here, this little notch right here, that's just marking the approximate location of what's called the trial passages. So recently, this was actually the day of the press conference. I made a post about this, saying that we've been expecting the trial passages to receive more attention, and now they have. We know they're right on top of the tunnel, and that they know that too, meaning the authorities. If they gain access to that tunnel, they probably gain access to all the chambers Corrado Malanga and Filippo Biondi detected in the Great Pyramid, as well as the temple to the east. Just hours before they prepare to unveil their scans in the press conference, Lex Levy and Jeffrey Drum, our friends, released this video showing that the trial passages have been cleared out like never before. A wooden ramp has been placed there, and I give a few more details about that. This was their video, and so I'm going to thank Lex and Jeffrey very much for making this film. And it was very well timed, coming out literally hours before the press conference actually happened. Um, so here you can see what the trial passage entrance used to look like. I mean, up until very recently, the whole gate was blocked off with sand, and this ramp was blocking these side tunnels. And they're showing as of the 15th of March when they released this film, it's now the ramp has been removed completely. That sand has all been cleared. So very clearly they are trying to get into the trial passages and make, see if they can access this tunnel. I believe they're trying to get into all these chambers that Malanga and Biondi showed. So this film was on Ancient Odysseys, that's Lex's channel. And I thank them both very much for sharing that video. You can kind of see actually right where that little white dot is. This is about where it connects in. And we believe that this tunnel connects directly to the tunnel that Malanga and Biondi showed right here, which means it would connect into the ramps and we would have a straight pathway, not only to these chambers in the front, but to this Holy of Holies chamber at the top, which is right above the Grand Gallery, and which we believe holds some of the most important artifacts or knowledge or evidence, one way or another, of we don't know exactly what's in there, but we know it's basically the most important chamber we've ever even detected in the entire country of Egypt. There could be nothing more important than this huge central chamber of the Great Pyramid. So I had basically seen the Khafre Project's report in 2022 with all these chambers, and I was one of, three or four people on Earth who had ever seen the model that William had built of this temple to the east with the tunnel connecting in. So I just put these two images together in Photoshop. Didn't really work too hard. I got the angles as close as I could. And basically, our tunnel is the very same tunnel that connects across between the two ramps. And it's very, very clearly would appear to be the same exact one. So we have the entrance into the structures that they discovered. We're 95% sure. So I told them that. I reached out to Corrado Malanga. I finally found an email address that worked to reach him, and we started communicating at that point. Corrado wrote me back and he said, I know your research. Currently, Filippo Biondi, Armando May, he said were informed of the message and agreed to this response, and I are busily working on the Pyramid of Khafre, and will show the first results at a conference in Bologna on March 15th, 2025. For security reasons, before that date, we cannot by choice communicate our results to anyone, but after the conference, we will be happy to interact with your group. I can only mention that under the Giza Plateau, there are many things that we will try to identify and share with everyone from March 2025 onwards. In the meantime, let's stay in touch. So this was 5 months before the press conference happened. It was in October of last year that I finally made contact with them, and we agreed that we would just wait. I said, that's so exciting. I can't wait to see what you guys release on March 15th. And I was preparing myself because I knew that they were scanning much more than just the Great Pyramid, and there would be a major announcement. So that ended up happening, and they put forward this announcement of the press conference publicly maybe a month or so before then. Actually, Armando May posted it on Facebook. He wrote this post and said the identification of extensive series of vertical shafts would be shown, estimating to extend to depths of at least 1 kilometer, with each major pyramid serving as an access point to these underground systems. The discovery of vast subterranean chambers with dimensions comparable to those of the pyramids themselves. Said a few other details here, but this is extraordinary clues as to what was coming out. That was February 8th, over a month before the press conference. So I started getting more and more ready. And actually, I started working on my film Revealing NC2 with Richard Gabriel because we wanted to get that out before their press conference. Because that film actually discusses the NC2 complex in the west of the plateau, which we also believe connects over to the Great Pyramid, to the Khafre Pyramid, the middle one. So we knew that they were focusing on the Khafre Pyramid as well, and we wanted to make sure we had all of our proof out. Richard has been working on the NC2 complex for forever. He's obsessed with it. It's very important to him, and he's been in there many times. And I got in there last year, thankfully, and was able to collect a lot more evidence that does prove that it continues, and we do believe it connects all the way to the middle pyramid. Just like Andrew Collins believes, who was the person who first rediscovered the structure back in 2008 after following clues from Henry Salt and Giovanni Caviglia, who had been in there in 1817 and provided us basically the only account from all of history of this structure. So we wanted to get that information out. We did end up getting out Revealing NC2 literally 2 days before their press conference. But we'll get to that a little bit in a moment. Now, this is their logo, and it does reflect their overall motivation and priority is that they're actually working to find and share this technology or these discoveries, I mean, with all mankind. It's very much a benevolent project. They're putting years of their own lives into this project and giving it away for free. They're showing the world what they've discovered. And yeah, this is really accurately depicting their mentality about it. A lot of people say they're in this for money, and it's like, hold on, this technique, for one thing, is essentially free. They're using free data from these satellite companies, which is public domain. Um, I'll show the companies later on. But basically, they have been dedicating their own lives, all their time, to doing this project, and they're not getting anything out of it. They're not here to get attention or try and be, I mean, I'm talking to them every week. We're in communication. I know these guys, and I know that they have no intention to just get popular or try and get famous. There's no ulterior motive here. I mean, Filippo Biondi's patent alone is worth, you can't even put a price on it. There's no reason he'd be trying to get money in any other way than the incalculable value of the patent he has just you know it's not the patent is still pending, waiting for it to be confirmed, but basically, yeah, there's no reason. I mean, he could make millions and millions of dollars if he wanted to license it to others, do projects, contracts for oil companies or mining companies or all these other things. And there are many other applications to use this technology for, which could save lives, could have a very positive impact on many different industries. But he is actually choosing to use this technology to show the world the truth about what's under Giza, which I believe is the most, um, uh, I don't know, it's the most benevolent possible use for this technology. It's something that can help the entire world, something I think the whole world needs to see. And so, anyway, let's get into it a little bit. When this happened, I was given their project abstract through an email, and Armando said it was okay for me to release it, but I actually thought that everyone at the press conference was going to be releasing it, so I didn't think much of it. I said, all right, great. And I posted the project abstract, which was a 6-page document with some of these photos and images, and I put them up on Facebook. So this was, you can see on March 15th, literally the day of the conference. And I didn't realize that I was actually the only person sharing it. So I ended up being the one person who released this entire discovery to the world with permission from the Khafre Project because I was already in touch with them, because I had already told them that I'd seen the world react to their first paper, and I was appalled by the reaction of the mainstream media, of the ministry, of everyone who just, the world did not pay attention to this at all. And it was the greatest discovery to come out of Egypt in my lifetime, and probably in the past few centuries at least, maybe ever, probably ever. Finding all these chambers within the Great Pyramid, it was the biggest thing we could possibly have imagined, and yet no one reported on it. Everyone reported on the Scan Pyramids team, who had been working there since 2016 and basically told us practically nothing after all those years of on-site work with multiple different techniques, but mostly muon scanning. So, um, I released the project abstract. I was the source of this leak that came out. It wasn't a leak because I had permission. That's one of the things people keep saying, like, oh, it was a leaked document. First of all, no, it was not. I had authority to do it, permission to do it, and I might have done it, in a bigger way if I knew that I was the only person doing it. But I thought everyone would be putting this out at that time. So I just put it up on Facebook and said, all right, any of you who are paying enough attention to me because you've seen that I'm obsessed with Giza and the underworld there, if you're following me, you'll get to see basically what's coming out. So that's where it first came out. The next day on the 16th, I put some more higher resolution images, and I put in a quote from the abstract, which is, as observed in the 3D models, below the ground level, ground zero of the main structure, vertically aligned cylindrical structures extend for hundreds of meters below the Giza Plateau. Notably, 8 of these structures are arranged in 2 parallel rows from north to south, descend to a depth of 648 meters, merging into 2 large cubic structures measuring approximately 80 meters per side. These features are illustrated in the tomographic images and 3D models presented below. The 8 cylindrical structures identified in our tomographic images appear as vertical wells, hollow inside, surrounded by descending spiral pathways. So that was part of the original abstract, what they wrote, and now let's look at the abstract itself. First of all, it was a link back to that paper showing where they had begun, and the book Khnum Khufu by Malanga and Biondi, which unfortunately is still only available in Italian, but Corrado told me that will be in English and Spanish very soon. So this is where they begin, and I won't spend too much time on that because I've already covered it elsewhere. They show a few of the scans from that project, and they're talking about, how they got this wealth of information regarding previously unknown structures. And then they released three, actually, these are the first two, of the actual scans from the Khafre Pyramid, from the internal structure of the Khafre Pyramid. This isn't below it, this is inside of it. And then here's the third one. And you can see these structures that appear much like the one in their 2022 article showing the King's Chamber, the Great Pyramid. So it's stacked like pancakes on top of the chamber. You see all these relieving chambers. It's a very reasonable you know, uh, interpretation to say these do look exactly like the one set of five chambers, relieving chambers above the king's chamber. And that was their interpretation of it. But that interpretation did not come from just these three images, as a lot of people are trying to say. People are trying to say all of these tube structures underneath were all just based on these three images too, which is absolutely insane. Of course, it wasn't just based on the three samples they decided to show in their project abstract, which is meant to be a very brief summary describing what they're going to be talking about. Then they showed another image that illustrates these tubes or hollow wells, which are, they're describing them as structural, meaning they must have a tubular wall around them, but they are hollow within. So they're calling them wells or shafts that are round and that they go 648 meters down to these two cubes that have a 80 by 80 by 80 meter scale. This is another image of the two cubes at the bottom, roughly, and then this is one that AI actually determined. By the way, a lot of people are saying they don't, they used AI to make these interpretations. Well, they used AI to validate their own interpretations because they knew people were going to say, this is pareidolia, you guys are seeing something you want to see. So they used that as a secondary verification, not the original or only one. And then you come to this final page where they say the third step was involving analyzing the tomographic data to determine the full extent of the underground structures beneath the Giza Plateau. The tomographic images clearly reveal that the structures exist beneath the plateau, extending below the pyramids of Khafre, Khufu, and Menkaure for approximately 2 kilometers beneath ground zero, as seen in the tomographic data, which places the Pyramid of Khafre at the center. That's the Pyramid of Khafre, with Khufu's shadow on the right and Menkaure in the upper left. These structures form a vast area of non-natural constructions following complex geometries. In the fourth step of our investigation, these structures will be further analyzed with the possibility of excavation to verify the artificial nature of the structures we have identified. By the way, when this text gets cut off here, this was my fault also, it was not theirs. When I first got this PDF, my word processor cut it all up and I had to fix it later. But I would have cleaned it up better if I knew that it was the only one that was going to be released. So don't blame them for some of this text being in the wrong place. This is the caption. Panoramic north-south view of the Giza Plateau with a tomographic line cutting through the Khafre structure at approximately half its height. The dark central line corresponds to this right here. The edges of the Khafre pyramid, northeast and southwest, which have low vibrational content and therefore appear darker. The various bright spots beneath the pyramids represent artificial structures located approximately 2 kilometers below the Giza Plateau, or more like 1.2 down to 2 kilometers. So that was the whole thing. That was the project abstract. That's what they let me share with the world, and I thank them for that because it ended up getting a lot of attention, as we might expect. And I'll just show a few of the closer up images so you can have some high resolution ones. You can just pause on these and screenshot them if you want. But here you see the 5 JED structures, they're calling them, because they look like, if this was a pillar or a column, this would be the top of the JED column. And if you look at the symbol of the JED in Egypt, it shows these 3 or 4 top what look like kind of like the top of a spine. There's a metaphor relating them to the human spine and those being the top vertebrae. But here you have, four of the central columns, each topped by one of these five structures, and then one in the center between them. So here are a few of these views. This is where it terminates down to the bottom. Closer up view from the east looking to the west. There's another angle. Now, what they call these spiral walkways or pathways, they said these could be stairwells wrapping around, they could be ramps wrapping around. We really don't know exactly what these spirals are made of or exactly, their shape perfectly, but we can see a pattern around these columns that are hollow that indicate some type of spiral structure in the internal wall of the wells. Here's just some closer ups of these three that they initially released. And finally, the one image that actually goes 2 kilometers down, as they say. So this is a slice across the whole plateau. And this was just really amazing, extraordinary. When I first saw this, my jaw dropped because we've never seen anything like this before. That's the Middle Pyramid, the Great Pyramid, and the Menkaure Pyramid. And basically, this is around ground zero. And then you come down 648 meters. This is where the two cubes are. And then you have another 600 meters or more coming down from there to the level where a lot of this stuff is. But you can see there are straight lines, and a lot of these structures down here appear to be artificial. That's why they're calling it a secret city or something to that effect, because it does appear to have been built, constructed, whether it was once above ground or was constructed underground. We don't know. We want to get down there and see these things to actually confirm it. But what we're seeing down there is extraordinary, and it's more than enough to indicate that it requires more attention and more research. So to give you an idea of how deep that is, this is 1 kilometer on Google Earth, and I just copied and pasted the corner of the Great Pyramid all the way to the southwest corner of the Menkaure Pyramid. That's almost exactly 1 kilometer. So if you take that distance across all three pyramids, double it, that's about how deep down the structures are going. So that's just to give you some context. So this is one of my favorite memes. Whoever made this is brilliant. This was a good way to represent the feelings of the public when this first, came out after I released it on the 15th. And I'll explain some of the first people who covered this. First of all, Liz Metcalf, who has a channel called Dreams of Atlantis, A Prior World, it's called. This was the first video ever to come out on the new discoveries. And she was using my project abstract to illustrate this new information because she was already a friend of mine. She already knew that I was following this closely, and she had already made films about their 2022 paper. So I want to give her a shout out for being the first person to record this. Then you had Greg Reese on the Reese Report. And Jay Anderson, and these came out shortly after. This one was May 19th, so 4 days after. Jay Anderson ended up becoming a friend of mine, and we ended up talking later, but right off the bat, he ended up going on Alex Jones and getting a wider audience, and then Joe Rogan was watching his video and learning about it. Jahannah James came out with this video, which like within a day had like 5 million views. It was went super viral and people were very interested. A few days later, she had tracked me down as the source, and so she started emailing with me, and I gave her more information because basically when these images came out, nobody knew that it was coming from me, from my Facebook page, not an official site or anything. So everyone was confused. They were looking back to the 2022 paper and not seeing any of these images. And not knowing where it came out. Jahannah James was one of the first people to actually track me down as the source and get an interview with me. We did do an interview soon after, and it was really great to be able to explain with her to the world some of the, where this was coming from, that this was a real discovery, and that the full press conference was going to be coming out. More information was coming soon. Then my friend Mike Ricksecker also covered it with me on a live interview, and Jay interviewed me soon after, and we did a hour and 45 minutes. This film, I gave him all of my footage from Giza, all these shots and still images of me actually being under the ground at Giza, and we covered a ton of contextual information that was very important. So that was an important one. All of these are going to be linked in the description below. I did another 2-hour deep dive with my friend Elena Danaan, and that was also very informative with a lot of context. We started seeing Robert Schoch, for instance, who is one of my most trusted friends, who I always ask about these things. Actually, I've been asking him for years about the 2022 report because I trust Robert very much. I was in Egypt with him in 2019, actually, and when we visited the Great Pyramid together, all the Scan Pyramids team equipment was set up in there. There were machines running, and I was asking him about the Scan Pyramids Muon technology. So Robert is someone I've trusted very much for many years, but he put out this statement, and it kind of explains how a lot of people felt. Like, he was saying, all he could really find was the 2022 paper, and he didn't really know where everyone was getting these images from. So, I just told him in that post, I said, there's a new document I released, and I sent it to him and made sure he understood where he could find more of the actual information about the current discovery, because obviously there's nothing about it in the 2022 paper. And I ended up doing an interview with him and Manu Seyfzadeh on Earth Ancient soon after. And unfortunately, again, Schoch was, I think, he was overcritical of the discovery because he hadn't at this point seen the press conference that had come out, a full 4-hour press conference that came soon after, which I told everyone was coming. Um, he was bringing arguments against it that seemed to indicate he had not seen the full press conference. And so again, I just sent him an email and I said, Robert, here's the full information they brought out. They did address many of these things, like I'll show in a moment. One of the concerns he brought up was the 1968 Muon scans that had been done at the Khafre Pyramid. I'll explain that in a little while. So Schoch is someone I usually trust, but he didn't have the proper information to fully judge it, and so he remained open to it. He didn't say it's fake, but he said he needed more information. So I was trying to fill him in on that. At that point, I had this pinned post on my Facebook page because a lot of people were looking to me for the information. So I made this huge list of resources and all these links for people to see. Um, so um, at that point, they actually made an official Facebook page and started releasing more information. And on that page, they shared a lot of this, a lot more scans that weren't in the original. And so all the people that are saying, oh, how did they get from there to that, from the scans to the models, there's a lot more evidence to show. They weren't working, obviously, with just these 3 scan images they had showed. We got some from above where you're seeing, the placement of these 5 JED structures, they're calling them, in the middle one. Um, and some more of these different scans, some of them that showed these square, 90-degree straight lines. This is what indicates the edges of man-made voids, actual chambers, not just cave structures or natural structures. There's several more of those. This one right here, how can you ignore this? How could you say this is natural? You can't. You can see in the scans themselves, not just their models or interpretations, that these are very clearly man-made structures. very deep, 648 meters. That's about half a mile underground. In this one, they show the existing chambers of the Khafre Pyramid, and then here you see more views of it. Now, of course, this plane is just dividing to show you that this isn't how short these tubes are. They're actually much deeper down, but they're showing you the bottom and the top at one time. So don't be confused by that. And then this was the tuning fork looking structures off to the side, which were also very interesting, like these tuning forks seeming to be pointing down, but in negative space, like they were these skinny chambers, these shafts going down. There's another image where they're showing a bit about how they think, this was actually a limestone slab, basically, that the whole thing was built on top of, and that these pillars, at least the walls of the tubes would have had structural support that could have been holding up all of this weight under the pyramid, potentially being a structural pylon, basically going all the way down to where it reaches more solid ground. That's at least one of their hypotheses for what these things might be. Because we know a tube, even if it's hollow, has a lot of structural support. This is how you build foundations for buildings today. So that's just one of their ideas about what they actually could be based on what we know so far. Then there's another one showing, more of the wider view scans that get all three pyramids together. And we're going to get into this later in just a moment. So of course we had Dr. Hawass coming out and as we expected, basically just denying it all. And the things that he said were basically unfounded opinion that this was just fraudulent and fake with no evidence whatsoever to back that up. He did confirm that no radar devices have been used inside the pyramid, and all claims about the presence of columns beneath the pyramid are baseless and lack any evidence, which is not wrong, but irrelevant because obviously with a satellite-based technology, you do not need the permission of the ministry or any permit to work on site at Giza. That's the whole point. That's what makes it so amazing is that they didn't need any of that. And we know that if they had gotten an official permit to work there, the Egyptian authorities and media control in the country would have censored the entire report and probably would not have let them say any of this. In fact, it's not impossible that the Pyramid Scan Project, the Scan Pyramids team, may have found much more than they've shown us, but being it is a ministry sanctioned project with University of Cairo and the Japanese universities working, they probably wouldn't have allowed them to show any more than they showed, even if they had found it, or they would have staged it over years to try and, milk it for more tourism and whatnot. So, yeah, it's really completely irrelevant what Zahi said about this because nobody ever claimed that a permit was applied for. No one ever said they brought radar in, and no one said there were expeditions working at the pyramid. So this was totally baseless and irrelevant, pretty much. And we imagine the ministry would just be completely silent on this whole thing as they were with the Great Pyramid scans of 2022. However, it was such a huge, huge controversy, and everyone on planet Earth was talking about this, so they had to say something. And this was officially what Zahi said. A statement on the fake news of the Khafre Pyramid. Um, I would like to make a statement regarding the news that was published all over the world by a group of amateurs. The news was under the Khafre Pyramid. The news was under the Pyramid of Khafre at Giza. They found a platform topped with pillars. All this information is completely wrong. By the way, it wasn't a platform topped with pillars. It was a pillars topped with a platform and much more. All this information is completely wrong and has absolutely no scientific basis. In addition, the Ministry of Tourism and Antiquity did not give permission to any individuals or institutions to work inside or outside the second pyramid. In addition, the claim that a radar was used inside the pyramid is false. Actually, the claim that a radar was used inside the pyramid was never made by anyone. So Zahi's statement is false. This makes no sense. The people who announced this wrong information. They use techniques that are not approved nor validated. The details announced would never have been seen by using this technique. Now, this is coming from someone who actually has said in the past that he does not believe in radar technology at all. He clearly has no clue what the technology was, or he could have at least said SAR technology or given some indication that he has some idea what technology was used, but he really does not. And yeah, he has no grounds to say that it's fake news or that they're amateurs. As we'll see soon, there is no one more experienced in SAR technology in general than Filippo Biondi, and there's no one on Earth who knows the actual technique he invented himself except him. So Zahi has no right to say any of this, and most of it's irrelevant anyway, because nobody said that any of that stuff was happening. Then you had people like Flint Dibble, and it's like, I don't think I even need to, I don't need to spend much time on this because this is another person who has not a single clue what he's talking about. He has no idea what SAR is. He's coming at it just to say, this is just too extraordinary for me to believe. And he's drinking a beer in this video, and he's being very rude and disrespectful and profane. I couldn't even listen to the language this guy uses. Everyone knows Flint Dibble is really a piece of work. He has no clue what he's talking about when it comes to this technology. In fact, he had to call in Sarah Parchek, who I'll mention a little bit later on, does have some understanding of remote sensing technology and has actually done some really good work in Egypt, but I'll explain later. She worked with Lidar, not SAR. So, again, completely irrelevant. Neither of them have any idea what Filippo's actual technology is. And that makes their debunking of this situation completely fraudulent in itself, completely baseless and irrelevant, essentially. Much like Sabine, who made this very vicious attack on them. And again, we don't have to spend too much time dealing with these people like Minuteman as well. Absolutely just completely rude, senseless, irrelevant, and also has no clue at all what he's talking about when it comes to this technology. He's trying to lean on other people like Flint and others who also have no clue. Um, Dan from Debunking, he's done a great job of being a reasonable voice in all this and just being like, look, he doesn't understand what's going on. And he's right. Minuteman does not understand the SAR-scan technology whatsoever. And then you had another, let's say, level of people who were coming at it, like Ancient Architects, which is a really great channel. I really respect a lot Matt Simpson. He does amazing videos that I've learned so much from. And so you had some of these channels I really respect actually touching on it, but being more critical, I believe, than was deserved, which was more disappointing because I really have a lot of trust in some of these channels. Land of Chem as well makes really great videos. Jeffrey Drum, who I mentioned earlier. Um, but I think his video on this as well was overly critical before, really understanding the technology. Uncharted X as well, Ben Van Kerkwick. These are some guys I really love and appreciate and respect for their work that is on the ground. These guys are actually going to a lot of the sites as much as they can and getting, some real firsthand research. And they're sharing as well a lot of secondhand research, bringing up the historical accounts and digging deep into these subjects. All three of them, I think, make really fantastic videos in general, but in this case, I think they were all a little bit too critical, at least for the time being, before having more information about the subject. But as I say, no one, whether they're supportive or not, no one is actually an SAR expert on any of this. So even the people who are supporting it are not SAR experts. Then, some of the big dogs like Graham, he referenced Jay's video because by this point, Jay had actually put out the first English interview with Filippo and Armando. And so Biondi finally got to talk about his own technology and tell people what was really going on. This was the first video any of us saw that actually came from someone who understood the technology at all, you know, whether they were supporting it or critiquing it. None of them really knew. And Graham at least had the sense to say, I'm sitting this out until we can see some more. And I'm hearing that, Graham might be warming up to coming into the conversation soon. And I hope that happens. Andrew Collins, he was another one who actually gave the team a fair try to bring forward the more information and actually kind of said, I'm not going to denounce this. We're going to wait and see. But of course, he was excited about it for the same reason I was, because we know the Tomb of the Birds over in the west end of the plateau. Andrew had brought forward this Terrasar X data many years ago showing this two tunnels actually, or cave tunnels that come straight over to the Middle Pyramid from the Tomb of the Birds. The Cave of the Snake is what he calls it. The official name is NC2, the North Cliff 2 complex. So he and I and Richard Gabriel all believe that there's a very good chance this cave system does connect to whatever is underneath this pyramid. So Andrew's been excited about it for the same reasons that Richard and Bill, I have all been excited about it. And he at least gave them the time of day, and I appreciate that. So in response to this, finally, Filippo and Armando and Corrado, they dropped this image after. This came out after the project abstract. This was the next image they dropped after the world had been able to talk about it a little bit for a while. And this is when, I felt so grateful the day this came out. Obviously, this is an extraordinary image. There's no way you can deny there is these huge tubular structures going so deep down. I believe what they said in the press conference was that these are approximately 20 meters in diameter. That's like a 60-foot diameter. That's huge. And if you imagine that, you can just tell by the length how enormous these structures are. And when this came out, it was directed towards Andrew and Robert. Armando wrote, as part of the Khafre Research Project SAR technology, I want to thank Robert Schoch and Andrew Collins for their comments on the Khafre Project results. In a few words, they stated, the news is interesting, but hold on. No enthusiasm. Let's wait for the technical data before drawing conclusions. And Armando said, this is the standard I expect from true scientists and professionals. Thank you both. We are open to sharing with you the information you need. So they have been saying if you want to ask us questions, you're welcome to. In fact, the official YouTube channel of the Khafre Project, which is Nicole Chicolo's Expedition channel, has a email address listed there, and so that's their official contact where you can email them with your questions, which is what they wanted people to do because English is not their first language and they prefer to have all the inquiries come in written form so they can actually look at it and decipher what it's saying and answer accurately. That's what they were asking for, and this was a reasonable request. Then Andrew and Hugh Newman came out with another video that was treating it a bit more fairly and tying it into, their idea about the NC2 complex connecting into it. And, soon after, this was a month after the press conference, and this was after the actual press conference video had been released, which was a few weeks after. And, they really opened up when they saw that there was a proof of the method included in the press conference that did show these chambers, the Osiris shaft, accurately coming down here. So we're going to get into that later. And then much more recently, they ended up also doing an interview with Armando and Filippo. So I thank Andrew and I thank you, and actually who thanked me for helping bring this forward too. And I appreciate Hugh giving me a shout out in his film and in this interview. Um, but this was after I had already done my English interview with them, which was the third interview they ever gave in English. And it was also, this was about 2 hours long. It was longer than the first two combined, and we went very deep. And that's called the Biondi Protocol on my channel. You can go check that one out. But I asked them all these questions, trying to clarify all of this nonsense that was coming out and give people a real idea. Of course, I had all this context already laid out on my channel, which a lot of people were starting to pay attention to. Um, I ended up getting a ton of views on my original series because people started noticing that I was connected to this new discovery and to the revealing NC2 as well. So again, all of these are in the description. This has so much more context about what we already knew was underground before this happened. So, this is an image that's going to be tied in the new episode of The Secret Underworld of Giza, just showing a lot of the stuff that we already know about and how it ties into the structures that they're revealing now. But of course, this is going to be explained in that next piece I'm going to do with Bill and Richard. But I can tell you, this is an image that Bill put together himself, William Brown. Um, this shows some of the actual GPR scans that we have that are showing the exact same structures. See these two tunnels coming out here? We're going to get into this soon. And this one right here, this is also right in front of, this is the eastern base edge of G2. And we have GPR scans from 2006 showing the entrances into this structure. You can see there's one there, one there, one there. This is what looks like these two tunnels connecting straight to these JED shapes, pillars, columns. But again, that's something we're going to get into in the next one. So that's just a little quick sneak peek on all of that. And now I want to talk about the actual press conference. So this is when we get into some of the material that they released that nobody has even been talking about. Much more information than anyone has even understood or seen. Because even when they released the video of the press conference, there was, subtitles, but the slides themselves, the text on the slides were not subtitled. So I've got a lot of translations of those to show, which explain a lot more that no one's seen. But for starters, I'll just jump through the the press conference quick, and then we'll look deeper at some of the high definition slides from it. This is Armando in the beginning, ended up talking a bit about his own expertise in terms of actual Egyptology history and his studies on the timeline and some of the astrology involved. So this is yeah, talking about Zep Tepi, which means the first time, and Amenti, which means the underworld of Giza, and the symbolism in the story. He's talking about the precessional cycle and a lot of things that I've spoken a lot about myself. Um, and this is an image of the entire press conference. You can see there was over 900 attendees, and that sold out within hours of it being announced because there were a lot of people in the world who had already seen how much they had put forward in their 2022 paper. And so there was a huge reaction, even though it was only in Italian. So that's the full room they got there. Next up, Filippo came out and he spoke much more about the synthetic aperture Doppler tomography and how it works, how the satellite moves over, how you have to account for the distortions from the motion and all this stuff. He went plenty deep into defending the actual viability and usability of this technology. He even thanked Dr. Hawass because they had put out this paper in 2022, and then in 2023, the Scan Pyramids team actually showed the endoscope footage of the North Face corridor, which is the corridor going into the Great Pyramid from underneath the chevrons. And so Filippo said that he thanked Hawass for actually confirming what they had shown the year before, and showing exactly how accurately they had depicted it. And I'll show an image of that a little later as well. Then he showed a couple other proofs of the method, which is obviously a very important thing to do here. Besides the fact that they did already have a peer-reviewed paper showing, and demonstrating that this is a viable technology in 2022, the whole world was still saying, show us more, show us more. Well, they scanned the Gran Sasso physics laboratory, and this structure is 1.4 kilometers underneath the mountain that it's under. This is a place for them to do these types of research where they can't have, all these signals and influences. They have to work deep underground. So this is a deep buried physics laboratory. And you can see in this tomography that you're actually seeing the structures of these tunnels that we know are underground. So this is how you prove the method. You scan something we already know, and something that's 1.4 kilometers, that's 1,400 meters. That's a whole lot deeper than, well, it's deeper at least than the 1.2 where most of these structures below Giza are that they're showing us. So that's a confirmation. That's 4,600 feet. It's the better part of a mile underground. And they're showing us those tunnels. We're seeing them. So the people are still out there saying there's no way this technology could possibly work, but we're seeing it work right here. Yeah, it's not crystal clear, but you're getting indications. You can tell that there are structures, they are straight tunnels. You can interpret this data. And so it becomes, if anything, a question of exactly how perfect the models have been reconstructed, which to me is really not a big issue. It's like, yeah, we'll figure out exactly what they look like later, but we can tell we've got structures going 2 kilometers under the pyramids. We can see these straight lines and right angles at that depth. They also, Filippo also showed the Mosul Dam in Iraq, and there's a tunnel across the top of this dam, which he showed. It comes out in the tomography. You can see the tunnel across the top. So there's another example. And then Chris Leto, he's a former F-16 pilot. He ended up coming out and actually defending them. And this is in regards to the North Face corridor. You can see it right here coming in from behind the chevrons. That's the corridor that later, the following year was actually shown with camera footage. And so they confirmed it. And Chris had gotten into this back and forth with Metatron, who came out with this video that got all these views. And he's a native Italian speaker, and so he interpreted the whole press conference and just had all these ideas about, mostly about Corrado and Armando's personal ideas about unrelated subjects, honestly maybe related to some degree, but which are basically completely irrelevant to whether or not this scan technology actually works. So they kind of went back and forth, and oh, did he debunk me? And then Chris was like, did I debunk him or did he debunk me? And it was kind of playful and kind of easy and not super disrespectful, but um, at times Metatron was pretty harsh and rude to Armando and Corrado at least. He didn't really have much to say at all about Filippo because Filippo is someone who's been working on SAR technology for 30 years. At least he could admit that he is not an SAR expert, which was good. But I can say right now that as I'm recording this, I'm going to do an interview with Chris this Friday, actually, and we're bringing Filippo with us. So me and Chris and Filippo are going to discuss the radar technology, which is great because as an F-16 pilot, Chris actually has a lot of radar experience and can wrap his head around it. So he's going to have some good questions for him. And in an effort of fairness, I actually emailed Metatron a couple days ago, and I said, if you want any questions asked of Filippo, I'm going to be interviewing him, and I'll ask him some questions that you give me if you want. This is your chance. Reach out to the source. You jumped into this subject and you're in it now, so here's your chance to reach the source of it. If you want me to ask Filippo something, I'll ask him. We'll see if he responds. He hasn't yet. This is the image of the North Face corridor itself, and this was one of the things Chris was focusing on in his rebuttal to the debunking from Metatron. And here is where you can see it coming directly in from behind the chevrons. That's their image of the North Face corridor. It was really dead on, in place, and a perfect construction of it. You can see it in this image here. So you'll be seeing the interview with me and Filippo and Chris very soon, and I'm sure Metatron will be responding soon after. But this is what happens when you compare it to the Scan Pyramids team. This is what they said this corridor looked like. They don't know. They don't know if it's going up or down or across. They don't know how big, how wide, how tall. They don't know the shape, if it's round or square. Meanwhile, the Khafre Project, well, Corrado and Filippo, this was before Armando had joined the team. They're giving exact measurements in meters, the size, shape, of all of these structures. Look at this information here. And everyone is saying that Scan Pyramids is, they're getting all this press, they're getting all this attention, they're getting the ministry sanctioned authority to work on site. And they're using 5 different kinds of techniques, the thermal, the muon, all these different kinds of tests they can do. Mostly the muons is what they're using. But this is what they came up with after like 10 years working on site. Whereas Corrado and Filippo, they just used their new technology and gave us all these structures in the pyramid in exact detail with, obviously much higher degree of confidence in what they were looking at. And so, yeah, it's absolutely insane that everyone's asking them to provide all this information, all this stuff, whereas the Scan Pyramids team is just, oh, everyone's like applauding them and getting behind it and saying this is great when they didn't show us anything. They got a very, very vague idea that there might be something there. Meanwhile, here we're getting it shown to us exactly. And both of these were before 2023 when we actually got the footage inside. So ridiculous that that Biondi and Malanga have not got more attention and credit for this so far. So this is Capella Space, and this is one of the two. The other is Umbra. These are the two companies that provide the data that Filippo is using. And both of these companies give away their SAR data signals for free. Anyone can analyze the signals data that they're giving away, which is amazing. And I really like to thank both of these companies for doing that because it's a huge, it's a really great, thing for humanity to have access to in general. It could be used in many ways, though it's really, you need Filippo Biondi's technology, his software that he developed in order to do the kind of work they're doing at Giza. But basically, it can be done for free if you have that software. And, you know, we're not going to ask Filippo to just hand that out to everyone because it's his patent and he's very, very correct to be very, very careful with it and to keep it very close to home because this can be used in many different ways. It can be stolen from him. Someone can try to copy it. He's absolutely right to keep it concealed and to keep it very secure because, um, yeah, it's just the military already has, technology similar to this. DARPA, HARP, they've been doing stuff like this. He could sell the patent to to the Pentagon, I'm sure, for probably $1 trillion if he wanted to do that. But no, he's out here showing us the truth about what's under Giza instead. So these two companies are actually helping to make it happen, and that's a huge part of what's really turning the tide here. that they're providing the data for free. Now, Manu Seyfzadeh is one of my favorite friends who's been working on this. He's not only a brilliant Egyptologist, not by academic training, he's a medical doctor, but he is a very thorough researcher, one of the best in the business, and not just in all of ancient Egyptian history, every era, every site, every expedition. He knows everything about it. He's my number one resource I go to ask about questions I have about Egypt. But he's also been very deeply looking into what he calls the Biondi Protocol, which is what I called my film about it, meaning the actual innovation that Biondi has added to synthetic aperture radar, Doppler tomography, technology itself. The Biondi Protocol is the secret sauce, so to speak, of what is actually allowing to the filtering process that allows the steering matrix, the all these different aspects of what's required in order to filter out everything else in these signals to pick up these very, very subtle indications of the seismic waves coming up from below, which is what allows him to actually get a view, so to speak, of the structures far below the ground. In this post, Manu also mentions that it does have the potential to save many lives in nations where the infrastructure is compromised of buildings or dams. You can detect cracks in the masonry. So this would be infrastructure monitoring. And it can be used, like I said, for oil companies or for geophysical science, natural sciences looking into volcanoes that are ready to blow, things like that, mining. So it could really be useful in many different industries. So Manu he's been sharing all of these posts, especially since these new discoveries come out that just go very deep into the actual science that Biondi's been putting forward. And he's actually been attempting to crack the code of what is behind that patent and how he is creating this filtering system using the software he developed to actually be able to do this because it is very clear that he is doing it. So Manu is basically the only person here who I would say has any clue what's actually beyond that patent, what's inside, um, beyond what any even SAR expert would know. Manu is the only person besides Filippo Biondi himself who has any clue what this new innovation on SAR technology actually is. So I'm directing people to Manu's Facebook. He's been putting out incredible posts about it. And he also gave me this conversation he had with ChatGPT, which is I posted it on my website, which is opusmagnum.org. Again, this will be linked in the description. But this article I put out with the full conversation from Manu, you know, AI can be useful in these things. It can be, but not unless you know what questions to ask. And so it's basically useless if you don't have any understanding of the technology already, or you can't ask for more details with the proper words, which is what makes this conversation absolutely amazing. And aside from Filippo Biondi himself, this is probably the best description of the actual technology, actual innovation beyond just normal SAR technology that is publicly available today. It's on my website. You can reach out to Manu as well and ask him more about this. He's basically the only person out there besides Biondi who is talking about it and has any clue what he's talking about. So much more than I know for sure. And he put out a great video as well a couple of years ago when their 2022 paper was published. And that video is linked within that article as well. So you can see that. It's like a 45-minute, hour-long dissection of their original discovery and breaks it down for people to actually understand what they're looking at. I also did two different interviews with Manu recently that do get into at least contextually related subjects. The work he did in his book Under the Sphinx, was the first one, showing evidence of the Sphinx existing basically long before Khafre's time. And the second part of that was about the Temple of Horus at Edfu and all of these texts on the walls there that are clearly corresponding perfectly with the story of Atlantis from Plato, with the information from Edgar Cayce. And this is where the Egyptians' own origin story is actually recorded. So if we want to listen to the Egyptians themselves, this is amazing information that Manu's brought forward. He is actually making the first English translation that is reliable of the Edfu building texts, as they're called, which are inscriptions on all the mostly the outer walls of the Edfu temple. So a lot of contextual information is in those two films right there. This was just a comment I saw someone else say, actually. But speaking of the technology itself and it being around for a long time, it says, I feel exactly the same way as you. The proven empirical evidence is required to establish authenticity and even peer reviewed. However, I received an email from a NASA doctor I know well and have been communicating with for at least 9 months, and I have been given a few tidbits of information that I can share as I've redacted the NASA doctor's identity. So this guy from NASA said, other tidbits you requested. I worked with the early synthetic aperture radar, it's probably what he meant to say, at Applied Research Laboratories at University of Texas at Austin while I was employed by ARLUT in Antarctica in the late 1970s. This week, SAR scans from space-based satellites has been released about the kilometers deep scans beneath the Giza pyramids in Egypt. Similar scans were made of the moon using HARP radar in Alaska after 2010. So he's saying HARP was already using this to scan the subsurface structures of the moon, to look underneath the surface of the moon from Earth, from Alaska in 2010. So this is not something new. This is something that has existed and has been classified in, agencies like HARP, DARPA, these advanced military black op programs that obviously they're not going to tell us they have that kind of technology. But this is like national security level stuff. They're not going to talk about it in the military. They're not going to give any chance for other countries to develop their own versions of it. The only real difference today is that now Filippo Biondi with this technology, it's the first time, someone who actually has goodwill towards humanity or who actually wants to do the right thing with this and use it to help humanity learn about ourselves through archaeology. It's the first time this kind of technology has really been in the hands of someone who cares and wants to do the right thing. Um, so. Yeah, it's like, who does it really help if you're only scanning the moon for yourself and you're not going to tell the world? Why not? We all want to learn. So why is this technology existing but not being used in ways that can actually benefit humanity? Well, because it's classified and it's just for our military and, the people who control it all. This is basically what everyone started saying. How did someone just go from these two pictures and create all of this? Which is the most idiotic response you could possibly put out about this. It's so obviously not built from these two pictures alone. Just because, as I said, these are the only ones you're going to see in the project abstract, plus the third. That does not mean that this entire model was built off of these two pictures. You've got to be a complete moron to think that that's the case. So why would you even bother making a meme like this? I don't know. In Jay Anderson's interview with them, this is what Filippo said. We've analyzed 1 year of tomographies, maybe 200 tomographies, 200 images. Two computers running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week were processing tomographies. So we have at least 200 tomographies acquired with different, let's say, tomographic lines, different images, and different satellite systems. Different everything, same results. Okay, they're looking from different angles, they're looking from different, all of the factors that they could possibly adjust, they have adjusted. And he speaks about how in the first month or two, they thought, oh no, this is crazy. This must be noise. This must be extra interference. It must be something. There's no way we're seeing structures this huge down there. And they tried everything. They looked from all these different images, but they have 200 scans to build these models from. Okay, so people are saying, how did they build this based on two or three images? That's a completely idiotic, challenge to bring to it because obviously anyone who actually looks into it and listens to Filippo will know there were 200 images they were using to build the models that we see so far. And Filippo has also explained on my interview with him, he said they're actually going to do another press conference in December and release all these additional scans. And across this whole year, they're going to be releasing more and more of the original scan images that were used in these models. So by December, we're actually going to see them release models, scan images of the entire plateau, more and more of them. And we're going to see he said by June or July, hopefully, they will have their scientific paper on these new discoveries published as well, but they're working on it. It's a lot of work, and they're obviously getting tons of attention now and trying to keep up with the press and all these different interviews and conferences they're being invited to, many of which I'm going to be at with them, which is very exciting. So in that same interview, Filippo said, "What is the maximum deepness we can achieve?" Now, English is his second language, okay? So yeah, it means depth. Let's say around 5 kilometers. That's what he said. So in ideal conditions, he's saying, his technique could accurately, get some t level of reading 5 kilometers deep, not just the 2 kilometers he's saying they've been looking at under Giza, but 5 kilometers. So is that crazy? No, it's really not. There are other companies like Merlin Burroughs, for one example, who offer similar services to businesses, and they have been for many years. You can commission them to do scans like this, and that's just one of them. Another one I'll get into here came from Louis Decordier, who's a friend of mine, and Louis organized and funded the Mataha expedition, which went to Hawara, a site in Fayum, about 90 kilometers south of Giza, in 2008, and they did GPR scans there with the National Research Institute of Astronomy and Geophysics, which was the same group that actually worked with William a couple of years earlier at Giza to do these GPR scans. And he was one of the first people to actually scan the ground at Hawara, where we know there is this massive labyrinth described by Herodotus and Manetho and Strabo and all these ancient historians describing that under the ground here is a massive 3,000 chamber double tiered labyrinth structure that's got just every wall is covered in these beautiful reliefs and paintings and art and all of this stuff. So this is, Herodotus basically described it as the greatest wonder of the whole world. He said it surpassed even the magnificent achievement of the pyramids, which themselves surpassed all the achievements of the Greeks and Romans. And so this is a major site that I care very much about. And I've been talking with Lewis a lot about resurrecting the interest in the subject and attempting to finally get an expedition to, not just scan because we've already done that, but get an excavation there so we can get in and film everything underground and also to find a way to lower the water table because the water table is actually damaging all of these underground structures and no one seems to be caring about it. Though it's not correct exactly to say find a way because we already know a way, as I described in The Secret Underworld of Giza Part 1, where I had Bill talking about Bill Brown, who was actually the very first person to scan Hawara just a year before Lewis, but they were actually working there at the same time concurrently. Bill was working from 2007 to 2009, and Lewis and the Mataha expedition was basically 2008. But yeah, we described that whole story in The Lion in the Labyrinth, and these right here, this is the University of Wrocław in Poland, who was working with Bill to do this the HAWARA Project. And these were some of the scans that they got under there, where again, you can see in the GPR scans that you have all of these very clearly, a lot of them are very clearly rectangular, 90-degree and straight line walls and everything. So man-made structures all under there. And Lewis and his team got a lot more, from when they were there in 2008, slightly different type of technique. But what ended up happening was they were censored. And where Lewis describes on his Labyrinth of Egypt description report, he ends up saying that they got censored. The conclusion of the HAWARA Geophysical Survey is, however, still waiting to be internationally released by Dr. Hawass, the Secretary General's Supreme Council of Antiquities, which is what it was still called back then, the Supreme Council of Antiquities, the SCA. Since the release of the scan results at the Ghent University public lecture, Dr. Zahi Hawass requested to stop communicating our results, intimidating the Matahat expedition team members with Egyptian national security sanctions. So Zahi told Lewis and his team to shut up about what they had found at HAWARA. He basically told them, you need to not report all of these chambers you guys found with your GPR scans. And the reason was due to national security. So you really have to stop and think about that for a second. And I'm not trying to segue all the way into HAWARA again. We will do that soon. And Bill and Lewis and I are going to do a round table on it, and we're going to get deep into HAWARA very soon. But I'm just bringing it up now to say that, there's a history of censorship, of discovering all these things underground. And I'm bringing it up because of this scan as well, which came from Dr. Carmen Bolter and Klaus Donna a few years later. Around 2014 is when they released this, but this was a geoscan from satellite. This was a satellite-based one after he and William had both done ground-based GPR scans. So this scan was actually done by a company called GeoScan Technology. And Lewis brought that up after Filippo mentioned that he could, potentially in ideal conditions, detect down to 5 kilometers, which sounded crazy. But Lewis sent me this, which was GeoScan's presentation of their technology, basically, where they do say, while other systems such as ground penetrating radar allow one to see perhaps tens of feet below the surface, GeoScan can detect anomalies some 6 kilometers deep using proprietary processing techniques. Okay, and this actual presentation existed at least back in 2014 when they did the HAWARA scans. So this is going back at least to 2014. They're saying 6 kilometers, they could do it. They use these filters and then the identification and detection of different substances with more complete appreciation of the actual information contained in ordinary light. We can detect subsurface anomalies, which show up as a kind of interference of longitudinal components. Again, here they say determining their material makeup down to 6 kilometers. GPS systems are used. They say they can actually differentiate between water, oil, gas, coal, ores, and metals, and determine not only the density of the material, but in some cases, the actual material itself, which I asked Filippo actually whether or not his method could do that, and he said he can't at this time, but he's working on basically developing a library of like fingerprint signatures of different elements. So in time, he could develop basically like an alphabet of materials, essentially, or kind of a reference chart to say, okay, when we're getting this type of signal, that's probably limestone or that's probably granite or that's water or oil or something. So his is still a young, process. It needs more development, but as it evolves, he may be able to detect the differences in materials as well. They say, we regret having to withhold details of the process involved. It requires intensive computation, utilizing computers, software, and special processing hardware to apply our techniques. So if that doesn't sound like Filippo's same type of technique, they're saying it's software as well that's actually their innovation that allows them to do this. But they say the best way to know these techniques are valid um, is to look at our results. In particular, a special study was ordered recently which detected water in Morocco. This presentation goes on to show a whole bunch of their examples and testimonials from their contractors, commissions. So they have all these jobs they've been commissioned to do, and people are paying them big money to actually go there and show them what's underground. Oil companies, mineral companies, mining companies. These GeoScan systems has been getting contracts like this for decades. They've been doing this. It's not crazy. And here they are saying we can look down 5 kilometers, and this is 20 years ago. 10 years ago, at least. Sorry. 2014 at least, but this is probably going back earlier than that. This company was working on the Bosnian pyramids, things like that. Anyway, I decided to see if I could connect with the GeoScan system company and ask them some questions about it. And I just, went to their website, which again, I'll link this in the description too. I went to their contact page and sent him an email, and a guy named Timo got back to me. He's one of the head scientists there, and he said he would be happy to do an interview for me. In fact, he said if we wanted to commission them, they would scan the Giza Plateau. And depending how big of an area it is, it might not even be that expensive. It could be, in the tens of thousands of dollars maybe, which is nothing, in terms of proving once and for all, that this is real or not real. We could have them scan down to 6 kilometers under the Giza Plateau. And if we see a completely objective, separate company that's got nothing to do with this, validating the same results as the Khafre Project, this is what everyone's looking for. If we have a completely objective team reproduce the results, this would be amazing. Now, the only issue with that is that, when you're putting in an application and describing to them what you want them to scan to get a free estimate, you need to have permission of the owner of the property. So I don't know if GeoScan is going to be willing to scan the Giza Plateau without permission from the owners, which are, this entertainment company essentially. But it's a complicated thing. Who owns the Giza Plateau? UNESCO is highly involved, the United Nations, and um, it's basically owned by very rich people who have a very, they don't want anyone to show what's underneath it. That's why they own it, to try and prevent that. So I don't think any of these companies are really going to do it unless we get permission from the ministry and from the owners of the plateau, essentially. Which means, they should give us permission. Why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't the ministry say, okay, if you bring the money to hire GeoScan to scan the plateau, we'll let them do it? They should, of course. If they want to prove that the Khafre Project are frauds, why would they not allow us to do that? It's our money. It's a non-invasive technology. No one could possibly get hurt by us scanning the plateau with another company. So that's something we could apply for. If we got permission to do that, we could see what GeoScan systems finds under the plateau as well. Something like that. We're discussing various potentials for how to get an objective secondary team to confirm what the Khafre Project has also shown us. So if the ministry wants to interfere with any attempt to actually get that done, especially if we're willing to pay for it, that's another clear indication that the ministry is intentionally covering up what's down there. And we'll see in a moment that there are many indications of that. In my interview with Jahannah, I said it would be great for them to do a scan of the Osiris shaft or something like that to show, another example of what the scanning technology looks like when it's scanning some structure that we already know the shape of. And this was before the press conference came out, the video of the press conference came out. In fact, this was Monday. This was March 22nd. And then it was literally March 23rd, the next day that the press conference was released. And this was their image of the Osiris shaft scanned. So the day before, I said, they could do that. And Jahannah's like, yeah, that's good because we know the Osiris shaft already. Next day, there it was. They scanned the Osiris shaft, bam, and I mentioned in my interview with her too that I have no inside information about these scans. I did not know any of it before it came out. I just knew they were doing it and it was going to be amazing. But I did not ask them for any inside information. I did not ask them to get secret looks at the scans before. I said, I know how this works. I'm not going to be obnoxious. You guys drop it when it's ready and it's time to drop it. So I didn't have any idea, but I said, obviously the Osiris shaft is an underground structure right there. It would be easy to test on. And they came out with it the day after I suggested that, completely randomly. So I did do English translations of a lot of these slides they put out, and later they put a whole they released all the slides, at least the ones Corrado was explaining in the press conference, high definition versions of the slides themselves, which I'll show in a moment. I actually posted the entire gallery of those on my website or on my Facebook, and they are all translated into English in the descriptions of them. You can read on the side what it says in English. So the Osiris one says the known structure of the Osiris well reaches up to 35 meters below its mouth. It consists of two levels. In the first, there are 6 rooms, two of which contain a pool in granite. That means like a tub. He means more like the sarcophagus, or what we call them. It's a granite pool, meaning a granite tub, the quality of which is not found in Egypt, slightly radioactive. In the second level, there is a pool filled with running water whose origin is unknown, which cannot be drained. I think he actually meant the third level, where there is one of the boxes, let's say, um, with running water whose origin is unknown, which cannot be drained, which contains a sarcophagus, which is also surrounded by running water. The SAR analysis shows that beyond, the structure goes deeper to reach a probably empty structure, a room, black in color, in the tomography. Now, this whole thing is just a Google translation, so it's kind of doesn't make sense, but that's not their fault either. They are showing there's, yeah, all this water around the third level of the Osiris shaft. And yeah, this is all the rooms that had the sarcophagi in them or the boxes. I've gone deep on the Osiris shaft in part 1 of the Secret Underworld of Giza. I'll show a couple segments from that, but just quickly, we'll show this is what's all the way down at the bottom, way, way deeper than even the third level of the Osiris shaft, Osiris tomb, it's also called. So yeah, you can see this is another view. This is the first chamber, the second chamber, the third chamber. Okay, these are the 3 levels of the Osiris shaft, and you can clearly see them showing up in the scan itself. So the truth is, the Osiris shaft, I had posted this on March 10th, 2024. This was over a year before the press conference. Is there a fourth level? It's time to tell the truth about it. Well, it's because we already knew there was a fourth level. We already knew there was structures below the third one. And I'll explain some of this in just a moment. This is my friend, this is Richard Gabriel's image of it, which is one of the best images because it actually shows the tunnels coming out of the third level. So in Secret Underworld, I said Bill also describes a fourth level to the Osiris shaft underneath the third one. And this is in 2023. Bill says, well, there's another level below the third level. There's a fourth level. We have the proof of it. I said, oh, interesting. He goes, yes. Our friend went in and they did ground penetrating radar and it showed the room underneath it. So this is how I knew because Bill told me and I know who he's talking about too. He also said, maybe, just maybe, there are more shafts that aren't reported. And our information was that the reason why there are 2 sarcophagus in there now is because they are covering the top of the shafts that go down. Okay, so our friend did GPR and they found a room underneath it and he showed me. And then he kind of giggles too, because it's amazing. And here's the third level, and again, here are the shafts going down. So Bill Brown, there you go, once again, calling it out before its history. Of course, Bill had also done GPR scans himself from the ground level of the Osiris shaft, and there were two different teams that he commissioned both of them to do the scans at the same nine different locations on the plateau. I can't remember if this was, I believe this one was Dr. Abbas and the NRIAG, but it might have been the Polish team. I think it was the National Research Institute of Astronomy and Geophysics, the one he was mostly working with initially. And this was another survey from that study they did. They were doing scans all over here. They did a scan here, oh, another one here, all along the Sphinx Causeway. They did a scan over here, another one over here. So we get into all of that in Secret Underworld. Corrado also mentions, that there were two, but I think it's one. He's talking about the second level sarcophagi in there, which is another thing we mentioned in our film. This is the second level, and it wasn't just two, and now there's only one. It was actually there were seven of them, which Bill also said there were seven sarcophagi in there. There's only two now. Where did they go? And how did they get them out of there? Okay, the shaft's not big enough, so there's got to be another doorway. That's pretty interesting because, yeah, you can't get these huge boxes up out through the Osiris. I mean, the shafts that go down are like, it's, you can't imagine how they could possibly have gotten any of those boxes out of there. I mean, it's practically impossible to lift those things anyway. They're huge. Some of them are 100 tons, 60 to 100 tons in that range. Depends, but this is an image of the one down on the third level, and this is after it was excavated. So let me just say that this was about a week ago as I record this, that Dr. Awas actually went on Joe Rogan, and boy, was there a lot in this. I don't care to get into it very deep, but I'll say one thing that Hawass did mention in this interview that is unacceptable, completely unacceptable, is that he claimed to have discovered the Osiris shaft, which is such a lie. I mean, it's such a lie, and it's such a disrespectful thing for him to say to Salim Hassan, who did originally find it. And it was known of and spoken of even by others before, but it was Salim Hassan who discovered it in 1933. And yeah, Herodotus had spoken of it, I believe. Salim Hassan was a truly amazing, amazing man who excavated everything all along the Sphinx Causeway and gave us so much information about it. And he absolutely 100% deserves the credit for discovering it. He went all the way down to the second level. The third level he wanted to get in, but the third level was flooded in his time, all the way up to basically just under the floor of the second one. But he gave his whole report in excavations at Giza in 1933 to 34, which was the year he found it. So again, I'm just giving you the reference points within Secret Underworld. You can go back. We already reported on all of this stuff. Zahi Hawass did not discover the Osiris shaft, the Osiris tomb. It was Salim, and he also said that there was a spacious hall surrounded by seven burial chambers. He's talking about the second level right here, in each of which is a sarcophagus. So he was saying there were seven sarcophagi on the second level, and only two of them are there today. So what happened to them? That's what Bill was asking, and that's a very good question. How did they get them out of there? Did they smash them to pieces? Is that how they got them out? We don't know. Now, the third level was discovered by J.J. Hurtek and Boris Said. So also not Zahi Hawass. Boris and JJ had both been working on the film Mystery of the Sphinx a couple of years earlier with John Anthony West. And my friend Ray Grasse was also with them on that expedition. He got some great photos of it. Unfortunately, this one's kind of low resolution, but um, he took this amazing photo, which is, they were down there on the third level and they saw this corner sticking up out of the mud, and they, wiped away a little mud and realized this was a very important stone. And technically, they weren't like allowed to dig, technically, which would have been, using a shovel or clearing any hard materials, but it was basically mud. It was kind of a, you know, I don't know. They had a supervisor down there, someone watching them. And when he had to go up to the top level to go to the bathroom, basically they all kind of just looked at each other and were like, this is our chance. And they just wiped, they didn't dig. They just kind of wiped away some of the mud that was covering this, and they found the sarcophagus, the box, on the third level in the water. This was their discovery. This was the discovery of Boris Said, J.J. Hurtak, Ray Grassi, Jojo Hoda, a couple other people who were working on this. And then, of course, as soon as it was understood that they had found something significant, the whole access to the entire structure was revoked. They were kicked out. They were kicked out, and basically right after that, um, Ray ended up writing this amazing article that I can't share enough. We shared this in part one, but Ray describes the entire saga, everything that went on, and so much about the internal politics of what it's actually like to work in Giza, which is really important stuff. So this again will be linked in the description. Of course, a couple months ago, we had Dr. Hawass posing in front of it, excavated, and he reported on the news that this was the greatest discovery of his career, which was just, you know, I'm very non-confrontational person. I don't want to get into beefs with anyone here, but we all know that Hawass has a reputation of being a claim jumper. He'll steal other people's discoveries and imply that it was his. So for him to absolutely just come out on Joe Rogan and say, I discovered the Osiris shaft is completely unacceptable. I can't let that go. He can't say that. He's disrespecting the people who truly did discover this. And I need the truth to be known about that because those people deserve credit. Salim Hassan deserves credit. Boris and JJ deserve credit. Richard Gabriel also deserves credit for that because he was one of the first, he was basically the only person up until pretty recently. Well, he was the first person to actually go into these very skinny, scary tunnels that come out of the third level and actually map them out and photograph them and document them up to this point where it splits into two. And in this image, he's showing the two splitting off, going off into this direction. But Richard's basically the only person who has ever documented these tunnels himself. Um, Besides, Zahi ended up sending in a young boy as far as he could go, and then afterwards he ended up getting a Japanese team to use an endoscope camera pushing through, and they made a lot further, but none of that ended up getting released. There was no report whatsoever, no official information at all. That was all kept secret, and it was Zahi working with the Japanese team. Zahi never let the world know what came of that. I do have some leaked footage that we can show of it. But that a friend of mine actually posted up on YouTube, but we'll show that later in the next episode with Richard and Bill, I think. Now I'll show one other thing. This is the article actually where Richard explains everything and shares all his photographs from inside those tunnels. So one other thing about the Osiris shaft that I haven't heard anyone say, but this is my own discovery, is that it's very clearly a key to the chakra system. And this is a piece of art I had made about the chakras. But when you have a set of 7 in Egypt, it's almost automatically going to be a reference to the chakra system, especially when it's in a column like this. There's a very, very clear likelihood to me that this entire structure is it's esoterically related to a chakra system. This is how the architectural language of Egyptians is used everywhere in Egypt. It's all about corresponding to subtle anatomy. It's all about the third eye. It's all about the spine, the spinal column, the Jed column, the pillar. Um, so there's no doubt to me, seeing this image, it must be in some sense esoterically tied as a correlation to the chakra system. There's just so many, I mean, there's so many points of context that this might sound like a reach to a lot of people who don't understand how the esoteric symbolism of Egypt actually works. But this is how you have to look at it. You have to understand that it is all these blueprints and templates that relate to subtle human anatomy and to your own enlightenment process, to the chakra system, to the third eye, and all of that. So I'll just drop this in here while we're at it that I will very clearly say that I believe this to be a representation of this chakra system. And if you look at R.A. Schwaller de Lubbock's or John Anthony West speaking about this and the correlation to subtle anatomy of the Temple of Luxor, which R.A. Schwaller de Lubbock's he called the Temple of Man, you see that there are correlations that are going so far beyond what the average human mind can comprehend on a genius level. This is extraordinarily advanced knowledge being encrypted in brilliant ways. And if you even use the Temple of Man format, you end up seeing that it does also align with the chakra system. It fits in quite well, I'd say. This is the Temple of Luxor with the human skeleton laid over it, the original image from the Temple of Man, Schwaller de Lubbock's. So I think there's very, very good reason to say that there's a correlation to the chakra system here. And I understand if a lot of people think that is a reach. Well, you can check out this video where I discuss more about it. But you have to understand how the esoteric language works. It's an architectural structure, blueprint, template that corresponds to human anatomy in so many of the cases specifically. So anyway, take it or leave it. You don't have to believe that. You can look into it though. So that's what we get from the Osiris shaft. There's more we could get into here as well, but especially, what's this over here? Like this next to it, we don't know of an entrance into this structure. If there's another shaft right next to it, we want to see what's up with that too. And not just all these chambers under the Osiris shaft, but all of this stuff below. This black, they're saying these are rooms and things. This is huge stuff compared to these little chambers of the Osiris shaft. This could be a whole village in itself. It could be a giant space. Maybe not quite that size, but so, all right. I just want to touch on LiDAR quick too. LiDAR is not SAR. It's a very different technology, but LiDAR is another air-based technology, not satellite-based, but planes. You'd fly planes over and you can scan very wide areas and find a lot of information about it. We've been finding incredible things in Guatemala and Mexico, South America, all over the world. LiDAR is being used, and what it can really do from the plane flying over, what it can do is penetrate through the layers of foliage of the trees and the canopies to see what the actual ground structures look like. However, it cannot actually penetrate underground. It's just a surface level reading. So it's been showing us all these amazing things in different places, and even in Egypt too. But most of this has been in South and Central America. It's been used a lot because it's good for rainforests. If you want to find like pyramid cultures, cities and stuff under very thick foliage, it's good for that. But it has been used in Egypt before, and actually it can penetrate through the sand to a little bit if it's very, very dry, maybe even a little more. But it was used to discover 17 lost Egyptian pyramids in the country of Egypt. Not all of these pyramids have been excavated yet either. This was 2011. Yeah, so this was, over a decade ago, but this was the work of Sarah Parchek, and this was really amazing discovery using LiDAR to discover 17 pyramids in Egypt we had never seen. Um, so again, that's the Sarah Parchek who ended up coming on with Flint Dibble to actually, back him up because he admits that barely that he is not an SAR expert. And so he ran to her to be like, can you back me up? Can you help me find a way to try and debunk these guys? And she joined on and entertained him that much at least, but here's the fact. She worked with Lidar. It's a completely different technology. So even Sarah Parchak, she did great work in Egypt, I really appreciate, with the Lidar, but Lidar is not SAR. She is not an expert on it. So he brought in an expert that was not an expert. And I really appreciate what Sarah had done, but I also have to say that the people she works with. Here's she's presenting for the World Economic Forum, and I'm not gonna. If you don't know who the World Economic Forum is, I'm not going to explain it to you right now. But they're the people who are covering this stuff up. They're the people who have an invested interest in making sure humanity does not find their own true roots, our own true history. You can look at some of Jimmy Corsetti, Bright Insight, what he's been showing about how the World Economic Forum's been interfering at Göbekli Tepe and preventing further excavations in Göbekli Tepe in Turkey. Um, he brought out a lot of information about that. But if you don't know that the World Economic Forum is pure evil, I'm not going to be able to explain that to you in this video. But she's working with the people who are actively working to cover this up, and there's plenty of evidence of that you can find out there. So the irony is horrible when you see this, the World Economic Forum saying our human story is being lost. They are the ones who are stealing it. All right. The World Economic Forum is the one responsible for our history being lost and suppressed. I won't go deep into the politics. We don't have to go there, but there's no use, bringing her on to debunk this stuff. It's like I have respect for her, but mm, she's on the wrong side of this, and so that's all I got to say about that. Um, this is Filippo wrapping up his part of the conference where he's discussing the actual patent, and you can see that it is still pending, so once the patent goes through and gets totally settled, maybe it is now, I'm not sure, but up until recently, last I knew, it's still pending. So um, that's what it looks like. Now, by the way, Flint Dibble, we can look him up on Google Scholar, and just for the record, because Flint, I'm not trying to start a fight with him. I really could care less. I've never given him much time because everything I've watched of him, I can't possibly watch more than 5 or 10 minutes. He's so ignorant. He's someone who just never has brought any valid argument against this. No technological actual argument or challenge to, you know, whatever he's trying to debunk at the it's I don't know. He's profane, he's just disrespectful. He's drinking a beer while he's doing this and laughing like it's just so, I don't know, not worth my time. But the fact that he is leading the charge of all of these ignorant debunkers who are spending their whole lives trying to get popular on YouTube and get subscribers and get, all of this stupid, shallowest stuff with no real basis for any of the attacks he's bringing to these people except his own opinion and insults. Um, it's pathetic, honestly. And, if you look at him on Google Scholar, he's got 21 papers. Okay, there you go. But not a single one of them has to do with SAR technology. So he doesn't have any experience whatsoever. He has no knowledge that could qualify him to judge this at all. Whereas Filippo Biondi, last I looked, he has 90 scientific papers, and every single one of them has to do with SAR technology. Filippo has been working on this for 30 years with this radar technology, various types of radar technology. You can look at Filippo's actual website, harmonicsar.com. You can look at all of these papers he's done. You can look at how many citations and all of that he has compared to Flint Dibble, and again, all of Flint's papers are completely irrelevant when it comes to actual synthetic aperture radar. Now, this is the bottom line right here. When I interviewed them, this was what Armando said straight up. There are about 250 SAR experts on the planet, and not one of them has challenged the Khafre Project. So that's the mic drop. That's the most important statement I've made in this entire film so far. 250 experts on this SAR technology, not one have disputed the results. That's what you need to know. There are a million people out there, influencers, content creators, people who, whether they support or reject the project, are simply not SAR experts. So they're nowhere near close enough to this field to actually gauge the legitimacy of the technology. And even the SAR experts themselves still have no idea what Filippo's innovation on it is. So there's basically no one on Earth who is qualified to say that this cannot be real or that it's impossible to actually scan that deep using this technology. Bottom line, end of story. So, yeah, no one has the right to say that this is impossible or fake. No one. So now let's get into Corrado's part of the presentation, because I think we've dealt enough with the technology itself for you to understand that really, you know, no one has the comprehensive level of what's actually behind the curtain on Filippo's own process to understand whether or not it could be real or fake, but meaning no one can disprove it. And the more examples we see of it, the more we realize, you know what, we don't actually have to know every bit of that science, because most people wouldn't tolerate listening to it for more than 5 minutes because it would be just way over their heads anyway. So, I mean, it really doesn't matter as long as you can prove that it is working. If you can show a scan that is showing the structures we know are there, like the Osiris shaft, like the Gran Sasso Laboratory, 1,400 meters deep, like the Mosul Dam in Iraq, like the Great Pyramid and the North Face Corridor, how many more of these examples do I have to give before people realize they're looking at the technology working right in front of their face? Here's one right here. Okay. Here's another angle of these JED structures within the Khafre pyramid. And as we get into Corrado's part of the presentation, we're going to be getting into some of the details of what they actually found. We're done disputing the technology. We're now just looking at it working. So we already saw that one. This is another showing how, each of these tubes are corresponding to different sections from the vertical view. Again, these are the cubes as they're seen from one angle. Here's another version of that where, again, if you want to dispute that these are natural structures 648 meters below the pyramid, you've got to explain to me then what we're looking at with these perfectly straight lines and 90-degree angles. Okay, this is a cubic structure. They're absolutely right to say that this is a man-made structure that deep underground. Half a mile down, there is structures that cannot possibly be explained as natural. Okay, this is reasonable what they're saying. And then we come to the point where they address the Muon scans that were done in 1968. Now, I didn't even realize, I did my research, but for one thing, I listen to Manu Seyfzadeh every day. I ask him these questions, and I know he knows more than me. And he was the first one to tell me that there was, um, to make sure I looked into this factor of the 1968 scans, and I certainly did. And I was, poised, waiting, expecting that the team would cover this because it is a reasonable thing to suspect. So they did scan the Khafre pyramid with muon scans. And by the way, the muon scans, these are cosmic particles coming from outer space that can move through matter, but they move through solid matter differently than through voids or empty space, air. So the idea is you can put these sensor plates inside certain chambers and measure how many of these particles are coming through and how fast they move. That's what they're doing with the Scan Pyramids project of the Great Pyramid. For the most part, that's the main technique they're using. But they did also do that to the Khafre Pyramid back in 1968. So that technology is actually much older. And it is somewhat reasonable for us to say, well, if there are these structures in there, then why didn't they pick them up in 1968 with the Muon scans? Well, the Khafre Project did answer this when they put out their press conference. So I was waiting for it and they delivered. So anyone still bringing this up as an argument needs to actually watch the press conference because it's absurd if you're going to deny this technology without really understanding everything they put out in their 4-hour conference. They said, we have no doubt that we could detect, this is from the actual article from 1968, the report. We have no doubt that we could detect a king's chamber anywhere above the Belzoni chamber within a cone of half angle 35 degrees from the vertical. If the second pyramid architect had placed a grand gallery, king's chamber, and queen's chamber in the same location as they did in the Cheops pyramid, the signals from each of these three cavities would have been enormous. Sure. Yeah, they're saying if they had the same chambers built as the Great Pyramid has, we would be able to see them looking up from the Belzoni chamber that was discovered by Belzoni, bears his name. It's got his name written huge in graffiti across the walls. Um, and yeah, that would make sense. We would be able to see it. We therefore conclude that no chambers of the size seen in the four large pyramids of the Fourth Dynasty are in our field of view above the Belzoni chamber. In our field of view, which is well defined as a 35-degree vertical cone coming up from the Belzoni chamber. So let's look at the pyramid. This is what Corrado brings up. And he said, guess what? We put in a 35-degree cone shooting up from the Belzoni chamber, and it would have missed all of these structures. So, isn't that interesting? Here's another view of it. From the Belzoni chamber, it would be missing each of these structures. Barely maybe catching the corner of this one or something, but you can't really see. This is in between the two of them, so it's not really hitting them at all, is what he's saying. This is the actual article, or this is the actual report from back then. And if you go down, this is the end page of it. And you can see they say, we have explored 19% of the volume of the second pyramid. We now hope to rearrange the equipment so that we can look through the remaining 81% of the volume of the pyramid. This operation will be greatly simplified by our new understanding of the effects of muon scattering on angular resolution. They say the volume of the pyramid probed in this manner is defined by a vertically oriented cone of half angle 35 degrees with its point resting in the Belzoni chamber. The explored volume is 19% of the pyramid's volume. We hope that with minor modifications in the apparatus, the complete mass of the limestone can be searched for chambers. So not only are they saying that they only scanned 19% of the pyramid, but they're also saying that they could have scanned the whole thing. It would be easy due to these new understandings of the muons and stuff. And again, this is 1968. This is a long time ago, okay? And this technology has come very far since then as well. So we have to ask, why did they scan 19% and ignore the rest? Why did they stop? Did they scan the whole thing and just decide that they were just going to show exactly the range that they could show without showing all these structures they knew were there? Did they cover it up? Very, very, very possible, as far as I'm concerned. They may have scanned the whole thing, seen all of these structures, and just said, okay, well, if we say we looked 35 degrees out, we can still get away with denial of having known later if someone else figures it out that all these other things are there. But at the very least, you gotta ask why in over half a century, they have never gone back to it, they never finished it. Why not? Why? And especially today, right now that they could do muon scanning in the Khafre pyramid, why would they not do it? They could prove or disprove the Khafre project so easily. using Muon scans, using gravity metrics, using any number of techniques. They could attempt to, um, you know, look at all these structures that the Khafre Project is showing. But I mean, for the Khafre pyramid itself, there is absolutely no reason for them not to just do the Muon scans, let's say, and the developed technology today of the Muon scanning. Why would they not do it? If they can just prove or disprove it, why wouldn't they? And basically, the only excuse anyone has ever said to me is it's expensive or it's, it takes time. And it's like, well, what is more important than this? If the Egyptian authorities really want the world to take them seriously when they say that the Khafre Project are, frauds, that they're amateurs, that they're not experts, they're not scientists. After Filippo Biondi, Dr. Filippo Biondi has spent 30 years working on SAR technology. They're going to call him an amateur, and they have no idea the technique he's actually using. Um, it's absolutely disgusting that the authorities and ministries in Egypt are attacking the Khafre Project for showing what is truly there when they have had, half a century to scan this for themselves and they have not, or they have and have chosen to lie to the world about it. So, this is basically how I ended my Biondi Protocol video was by saying, I'm shifting the burden of proof back to the ministry. If they believe this is false, they better go there and scan that pyramid themselves and prove to us all that it's solid stone through and through, because it's clearly not. They could do that any day, and they haven't done it in all this time since 1968. So they want to call this amateur work, it's on them. All right. They should go back and scan it if they want to prove that it's all fake. So it's absolutely absurd. But this is something that no one can use as an excuse. They can't say, oh, they scanned it back then, because we can see that that cone, they said, that 19% of the pyramid they scanned, it would have missed all these structures. So I think it's actually more evidence to show that they are aware of multiple structures in here, and they chose to say the largest possible range they could without admitting that they would have had to have hit these things if someone in the future ends up discovering them, as the Khafre Project has now. So, Ministry of Antiquities, go scan the Khafre Pyramid. Get the whole Scan Pyramids team over there, have them look at it. If not, don't you dare say that these guys are lying, because we're seeing it. They're showing us. Now we're looking at the bigger scan here, and this is the area where the cubes are, he's saying. So this gives you a little bit more of an idea, where how to read this one particular image. This is the 648 meters from the Khafre pyramid below to the cubes, and Corrado's saying there are another 600 meters down too. So yeah, that's not quite 2 kilometers, but that's like 1.2 to 2 kilometers, which is what they're saying. A lot of these structures are appearing at, the man-made structures. That's a closer up of the cubes. That's an image of both of them together, the Great Pyramid and the Khafre Pyramid next to it. And I'm going to share some of the higher definition images of some of these later, but just getting through here, it's another one of all three of them. Another one from a distance. Now, this one, no one is talking about this one. But what you're seeing here is actually, he's saying they're scanning the entire plane. This one is actually underneath Khnum Khufu, which is the Great Pyramid. So this is the first scan we're seeing of what's underneath the Great Pyramid. The other ones are of the Khafre Pyramid. The ones in 2022 were of the interior of the Great Pyramid. This is our first view of what is underneath the Great Pyramid. No one is talking about this. No one is putting this together. I do have more images of it later, but first I'm just going to quickly show these. This is the other one that no one is talking about. This is the tomographic line cutting straight from the Khafre Pyramid over to the Sphinx. That's the Sphinx right there, the Sphinx Temple, the Valley Temple. This is the Sphinx Causeway. This is where we did all the GPR, or Bill did all the GPR scans back in 2006 that we released in my films. Um, and so this is what you're looking at is going straight down into the ground along this line. All of these shafts and things, this might be an angle kind of, so it might be cutting over upward, and that's why they're saying some of these forms might be cutting into lower parts of the shafts up here, but it's basically starting here and maybe cutting down, but a little bit north. So we're seeing more and more of these huge tubes and structures going down like 1,200 meters. Okay, all the way from the pyramid to the Sphinx, we're seeing these tube structures. It's not just underneath the pyramid. It's underneath the Great Pyramid as well. It's underneath the Menkaure Pyramid as well, but it's also all along the Sphinx Causeway. We are seeing enormous tubes, hollow wells, pipes, going down. So this is another thing that no one is talking about that is completely extraordinary. And we'll come back to that a little bit more later with a bigger image. But you can see here that he's saying 1,200 meters. You've got structures going 1,200 meters down all along the Sphinx Causeway. And notice also that the scan is cut off before it gets to the Sphinx. And I really think that there's a good reason for that because that, you know, it's very dangerous to start talking about what is actually under the Sphinx. But they are showing us right here, boldly showing us that they've got it. They didn't have to draw this red line all the way to the end. They're telling us that they already have that last little segment, which would be right underneath the body of the Sphinx. So that's clearly something that's going to be coming in the future, but they need to be careful about how they release it. For now, they're just showing us a segment of this line. So this is the one that's called Campbell's Tomb. That's one of the big ones. You got the Osiris shaft is right about here. And there's just these shafts everywhere along here. All these are shafts right here. Then this whole area right here. I just released an entire film, like an hour long, showing at least 100 entrances, shafts going down in this area right here. That's basically the South Mastaba Field, or the Central Mastaba Field, sometimes called, over by the tomb of Kenkawes and what's called the Second Sphinx over here. So there's tons of shafts going down there. And this is where Corrado wraps it up, basically. He said at the end, "It's simple for us. The pyramid is like a safe full of information. This safe full of information, it was closed by some characters. Basically, the two radars that we have found, they managed to open this safe. Inside this safe, of course, there is the one I call the truth, the reality of the facts. Um, so it's true. They're cracking a code within the pyramid by using these um, methods. And so here I'm going to show you that this is the press conference 104 slides that Corrado shared. I put them all on my Facebook, and if you click on each one, you can see in its description the English translation. That thanks to Erica Mermuse, who's a friend of mine, who took the time to make all the English translations, and I thank her so much for that. It's awesome. So that's the only place in the world that I know of where you can just go and see all of the slides and their English translations. But I've got a few of them I brought into Photoshop to put the translations onto myself in English. This one doesn't have any translation. It was just a slide by itself. But I'll go through a few of the English translated ones because this isn't even translated in the subtitles, when you watch the press conference. They translate the spoken English, but not the written. So I don't know if I'll read every single one of these, but you can see they're starting to talk about the vertical view. This is looking down on the pyramid where you can see all these different the jed structures from above and how they're laid out from the top. Here again, you can see them kind of putting it together when they're looking at some of these and they're saying, well, these do look a lot like the relieving chambers above the King's Chamber, and these look like similar structures to what we see in the Great Pyramid. Um, so yeah, they're looking from multiple sides. This is just another one. These are some of the ones we already saw at first, but now you can see the English translations. These are just so you can pause them and read them if you want, pull them. Um, there's another one showing that. That's just another of the models. This one we basically already saw, but there's a translation talking about the cubes at the bottom. Here again, you're getting to see all this square 90-degree angles way deep down. And this one shows more proportionately what it would look like if you squeeze it in so that it's actually proportionate. They're saying 137 meters is the height of the Khafre Pyramid, which is actually a very important number related to the fine structure constant of the universe, which is, I believe, a code based on the Khafre Pyramid is actually intentionally indicating something very important with that number because they did use meters, in fact, and I can prove that elsewhere, but not going to sidetrack to that right now. This is how tall it would be, the tubes going down to where the cube is. And it's interesting too that you can see some of these straight lines all the way down. I mean, to me, this says that there could be actually a square structure of some type. I don't know. But it would seem to me there might be some kind of square encasement around all eight of these tubes as they're going down when you see these lines that are, parallel to the cube at the bottom. There might be some kind of wall structure or something around all of the tubes. This one's pretty interesting too because it's showing a difference between these outer layers of the pyramid and the inner, meaning it might be a different kind of stone for a whole portion of it. Maybe this was the original pyramid and then a whole bunch more was added onto it, expanding it later, possibly. We don't know, but they're saying it kind of looks like a square-based bell, and that this could be a reverberating structure on the outside of it that's a different material from the inner filler stones, basically. But the vibration of these outer stones are different from the inner ones, is basically what they're seeing. So another one showing the Jed column structures. And again, I'm just running through these so you can pause it and read all the English ones if you want later, but I don't have to read all of this. And again, they use AI to interpret some of the signals once they had already filtered them and processed them, not because they're trusting AI to interpret all of this, because they want a second opinion, because they want something to show that this isn't just their imagination, which is a great way to do it. Using AI to confirm that it's not just them coming up with this and wanting to see it, and so believing it's there. That's what pareidolia means. That's the word he actually used to avoid any of the critics saying that it's merely them imagining what they want to see and pretending it's there. So coming back to this one, here's the better view. Here's just a great image that really lets you see up close. Absolutely phenomenal, extraordinary. We're seeing structures 1,200 meters deep along the entire span of the Sphinx Causeway to the pyramid. I don't have words to explain how important this is. No one is talking about this image. Everyone's coming out asking me, oh, are they going to do the rest of the plateau? Are they going to look at the rest of it? They already did. They already shared it. It was in the press conference. No one is watching the press conference. I'm watching it multiple times because I know this needs to be taken seriously. But this is a discovery in itself. This one image is showing us something world changing. So I don't know how to hammer this in hard enough that what we're seeing already is showing us the whole plateau. We're getting these cross sections, like they sliced the cake down, and this is the cross section we're seeing of it. Huge structures, vertical, cylindrical structures all along here. I just, no one is talking about this. They've already shown all of this stuff, the whole plateau. And get ready for the next one. Are you ready for this one? Um, okay. Menkaure Pyramid, Khafre Pyramid, Khufu Pyramid. This is across the entire plateau. Well evident square geometric structures. All of this stuff underneath. This is all, I believe, that same 1200, 1400-meter level down. We're seeing structures underneath the entire plateau. So I don't know. I don't know why no one is paying attention to this, why no one is translating this, why no one is actually looking. They have already shown us the whole plateau has these structures underneath. This is backing up that original image, the original one that was the very last one in the project abstract. All of this stuff is underneath the plateau, and you can see these same all parallel lines, straight lines, um, straight line structures. It's like you're looking at a city. It's like you're looking at streets and roads. You're seeing all these parallel structures, and then straight horizontal tubes and columns. This is a view of the secret city under Giza, if you can call it that. These are man-made structures, 1,200 meters below the Giza Plateau. I've been saying this for so many years. I've been saying it. I don't care about saying I told you so. I don't care about gratifying my ego. I don't care about any of that. I just want the world to wake up and see we were all right. Me and Bill and Richard, we have reason to dig. We have reason to explore. We have reason to do many more kinds of tests here. We have absolute reason to get full access to research this from the ministry, from the Egyptian government. There is no reason why they should deny further investigation of this. There's no reason why they should claim it's fake. The people who are still saying it's impossible to see that deep need to wake up and see that we are seeing that deep. So they're saying it's impossible while we're looking at it happening. Okay, this is the secret city underneath the Giza Plateau. It was written about in the Book of the Dead, in the Book of Coming Forth by Day, in all the underworld texts. They are writing about the underworld, which does have physical correspondences to the underground of Giza itself. The metaphors, the descriptions, they are not purely esoterically symbolic, they are actually describing real structures. And we've known about this forever. We've heard about it forever. We've thought about it and hypothesized about it and wanted to see the truth. This is it, folks. We are looking at it. And still, all the world is denying that it's possible. They can't scan that deep. They did scan that deep. We see it. Okay, here's another version of that same one. Look at this. That's all three pyramids. Let's change angle. You can see the square structures practically under the entire plane of Giza. Look at this. Look at these. Lines are all parallel in the same direction. It's like you're looking at this grid of streets and buildings. It's like a city. Look at this line right here. Okay? This is like the layout of a city. You're seeing it all. No one is talking about this. They have shown us what's down there. There's an extraordinary, massive construction project 1,200 meters under the Giza Plateau. I don't know what to say. We're looking at it. People are saying it's impossible to see that deep. We're seeing it though. What can I say? It's happening. It's right before your eyes and you're denying it. So here's another one showing all three. And again, that column of central energy of the energy here is vibrating differently. There's something very powerful right in the center of the Khafre pyramid coming down. You don't see it in the other two because the tomography is not cutting directly through the center of them. But this one, you are seeing this column of energy or a physical structure potentially directly in the center of G2. Okay, this one actually came from Manu Seyfzadeh. He shared this. He was saying from this original image we had seen, this is the Great Pyramid, this is the Khafre Pyramid, this is the Menkaure Pyramid. So from this approximate angle, we can see that this interesting thing down here is actually basically underneath the Sphinx. Whatever this thing is, that's, if this is 640, it is like 700 meters or so below the Sphinx. Whatever that is, we don't know what it is, but basically, that's the layout of the angle we're looking from, roughly at least. All right, so they also showed, examples of other well structures that have been built in history that do use spiral staircases going down, many more examples than this, but this tomography shows that even under the other pyramids, there are descending wells and that they end in large square or rectangular structures. So again, we're looking here at the Great Pyramid itself. And what is actually under the Great Pyramid itself is this huge, huge column right in the center, and then all these smaller ones all around it. So here's the up close of that one. There is evidence that even under the Pyramid of Khnum-Khufu, there are descending vertical structures. Just look at that for a second. That's underneath the Great Pyramid. Unbelievable. No one is talking about this. People are asking me, when are they going to scan under the other ones? They already have, folks. They already have. This is the most exciting thing on Earth. I don't know how to emphasize this more. Um, this is underneath the Great Pyramid. So we're already seeing it. We're seeing all of it. And quite frankly, there's a whole lot more information to still get to. But this is pushing 3 hours at this point. I don't want to make this video too much longer, so I'm going to wrap it up here. But I'm going to say we're seeing this stuff work. And how many people, like say your computer, think about your computer. Do you know how every single chip and processor works in your computer? No, you don't, but you can still check your email. You can still watch a video. You can still do what you need to do with your computer. You don't have to know what every processor is doing. It's the same here, okay? We don't need to know all of this super advanced physics and math in order to see that these scans are actually happening. We're being shown that it can happen. We're being shown all of the evidence we need to know. We don't have to know every single bit of what's going on behind the scenes if we can see that it is working, especially on structures we already know exist, like the Osiris shaft, the dam, the physics laboratory, all of these things. We are seeing it happen. So we're going to go deeper. There's more to say here, and we'll be bringing all of this out in part 5 and 6 and 7 and so on of this series because there's more to say. In the following episodes, we are going to get deep into, we can talk about speculating as to what these things actually are down there, opening our minds a little bit and saying, well, if we know this much, then why don't we think about what this could be? That's okay, as long as you're not making claims. We can get into that a little bit. But we're also going to bring forward some new exclusive disclosures of some of the most important things that have never been shown to the world. We're going to bring forward brand new stuff. We're going to tell you so much about the Sphinx Causeway. We're going to show you so much about what is under the Sphinx and how it connects to Bill Brown's stable in the village right next to it. We're going to show you so much about the scans and all of the collective evidence we have for the tunnels that we know are entrances into the chambers that the Khafre Project has now discovered in the Great Pyramid and the Khafre Pyramid. All of it. We're going to bring forward so much more information, and I'll probably have to go through some more of this information just on my own before we bring in Bill and Richard. They're going to bring in so much more of their own expertise and prior knowledge about this subject, and we're going to see exactly how all these GPR scans are showing us exactly what's there. We are building a whole map of the halls of Amenti, of the underworld of Giza. That's the point of this show. And yeah, I have deviated from the norm on a little bit. I'm sorry I didn't get music in here and everything, but we need to plow through this information. There will be probably a whole nother episode just of me trying to get through some more of this stuff just to lock it all in. But I think we've covered a lot of the information the world really needs to hear already in these 3 hours almost just in this episode. So let's wrap it up. Let's talk about a couple things that are coming up this year because I want to get this information into this episode as well. On June 20th through 23rd, we're all going to be in Greensboro, North Carolina for the Cosmic Summit, and this is going to be amazing. It's one of the cheapest conferences in the whole country, and yet it is stacked with the biggest names in ancient mysteries. We're going to have so many people. We're going to have Dr. Schoch, Praveen Mohan, Hugh Newman, Ben Van Kerkwick, a really wide assortment. Jay Anderson's going to be there. We're all going to be there with Armando and Filippo, and they are all going to get to see that Armando and Filippo are not jokers or frauds. We're going to be talking about it as a community. We're all going to be having the conversation that needs to happen here. So this is huge. The Cosmic Summit is going to be a great one, and you just don't get that kind of speaker list for the price this is at. So I thank George Howard, who's setting this up, for keeping this affordable for everyone. It's going to be amazing. So after that, by the end of June or July, we're going to be getting their full peer-reviewed paper that everyone's been asking for, even though they already did one. We're going to get that hopefully by the end of June or sometime in July, but we'll see how long it takes. They're working hard on it. We have, in the next couple of weeks, we're working on putting together an official English language channel for the Khafre Project, which is going to be a continuous stream. We have some other big guests we're going to be pulling onto that. This is going to be really cool as well. You'll see announcements about that as it comes out. We are doing another conference in September, all three of us, me, Armando, and Filippo. It's going to be the 26th to the 30th at the Pyramid House just outside Chicago. This is where they do the annual Pyramid Technology Conference, and all three of us will be there with Chris Dunn as well. So that's another one you can get to, but not until September. In November, all three of us are going to be in Dubai with Dr. Hawass himself. He's going to be speaking at the same conference as Armando, Filippo, and myself, as well as Elena Danaan, Sasha Stone, and Dan Willis. So this is a very consolidated, it's going to be called the Galactic Discoveries Exchange. And Zahi's going to close the whole thing out. So, Elena, when she worked in Egypt, as I mentioned, she actually worked with Hawass and he likes her. They're on good terms. So we have a chance to sit down with him. We have a chance to potentially interview him, possibly. We're not sure about that. But it will be a very unique situation where we'll have an opportunity to at least connect with him and see if we can get him to, when he came on Joe Rogan about a week ago, Joe actually kind of forced him into saying that he would be willing to speak to them, to the Khafre Project. And oddly enough, that interview came out the exact same day as we released this conference poster, which announces that we will be there in Dubai with Dr. Hawass. That's going to be happening November 8th through 9th in Dubai. And then it's possible I might be going into Egypt immediately after that. There are a couple tours going on at that time. There are some other things also happening this year, but I just wanted to throw out a couple of those so you know if you want to actually get a chance to meet me or Armando and Filippo, get more involved in the conversation, be part of it. This is history in the making, folks. If you can't tell from this film, believe me, this is real, this is happening, and this is going to change the world. We're watching major shifts take place. And not just in the consciousness of the world, not just in in our minds or some people's minds, but in the geopolitical balance of power on the planet. There are things shifting within the ministry. Power is shifting. There are good people in the ministry who want the truth to come out, believe it or not. So I'm not trying to say that everyone involved in the government or ministry in Egypt is behind this and wants to be covering it up. A lot of them are covering it up and don't want to be. It's a complicated situation. I'm not making any broad accusations because it's very complex. But things are changing, things are shifting, and we are talking with the Khafre Project right now. We have a meeting coming up that's just going to be me, Bill, and Richard, and Armando and Filippo, hopefully Corrado as well. We'll see. We are pursuing in every way we possibly can the ability to do an on-site investigation because that's the only critique anyone should have is, well, we're not going to know for sure until we see it with our own eyes. And I agree. We all agree. We all know that this is preliminary information that should be enough evidence to allow us to get the permit from the ministry. That's at least what this evidence is showing us. And we can basically prove at this point with how much you've just seen in this film here alone we have enough evidence to prove that if they refuse our attempts to actually get more information or to confirm or debunk it, anyone who wants to further research the situation, if the ministry wants to block that from happening, that's evidence that they are intentionally obstructing the investigation. Okay. So what else can you call it? If we want to get a geoscan to scan from satellite, they can't hurt anything. There's no risk to the monuments. Um, there's no reason why they should deny us the right to gather more information about this or share more information. But again, they're going to be doing one other conference. Actually, they're doing another conference in a month or two. I forget the date exactly in Malta. But then at the end of the year in December, they're going to be doing another major conference of their own in Bologna that will be in English and Italian. And at that point, they're probably going to release all kinds of scans of the entire plateau. They're hoping to really have the entire plateau underworld mapped out and modeled by the end of this year if they can. We'll see how much they can process. We'll see if we can get Filippo some more processing power under his watch so he doesn't have to give away his software, but he can still work on more images potentially. We're working on all of these things behind the scenes, and we are very close to getting this permit. And so I want the whole world to manifest this with us. I know more than most people that it's nearly impossible to get this. And so many people are commenting, yeah, this will never happen as long as this is that, as long as he's in charge. Um, it's not impossible. It's difficult, but we know how to do it, and we're closer than we have ever been before. So I want to make that very clear as well. And we have a good working cooperative relationship with the Khafre Project, and we will inevitably have to be joining forces. I think everyone in both projects understands that to be the case. So, okay. I don't want to make this video any longer. This is where we're at. There's a lot of amazing stuff to look forward to this year. There's going to be so much more data coming out this year. And yeah, I'll just ask you to keep up here. We're going to drop so much more information in the next couple episodes of the secret underworld of Giza. So thank you so much for watching this whole thing. And remember that the whole library, the bibliography of everything I've just said is right there in the comments, in the description. So leave a comment, like, subscribe, and please share this video on the comment section of every other video you find about this subject because I've put a lot of work and time into making sure I'm lining up all the resources for you to use. I'm not asking you to trust me. I don't think you should trust anyone, to be honest. I'm telling you, no one out there knows what they're talking about. And for some of these details, I don't know what I'm talking about, which is why I am passing you along to the people who do know more than me and giving you those resources. Look at Manu Seyfzadeh. Listen to what Filippo Biondi himself is talking about because 99% of the people out there have no idea. I'm just being honest. I'm not trying to attack anyone. I'm being real. They don't know. And if you're not an expert in this kind of technology, it's nothing personal. You're just not qualified to judge the situation. So that's my message. We've got proofs that this thing works. We've got proofs that none of the debunkers are coming with anything that holds any water. Um, and that's it. That's where it rests. So with that, I'll just say that we will see you in episode 5, and we'll see where it goes from there. Thanks so much for watching, and yeah, hope you enjoyed.
Is true. It's not one tunnel, it's a net of tunnels covering the whole area. The oldest tunnels being known is what located between Dashur south and Abrawash north. And this is the land of Osiris. And I think it's the oldest